Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Britton's Hangout Hour, episode 74. I'm back. I'm feeling refreshed, even though this is probably going to be up long after this is recorded. So that's probably not going to matter. But yeah, I took a break for a week, and now I'm back, and I'm feeling good, and I'm here with R.H. Snow, or
Hi!
Rebecca. She's
Oh
also
my
known as
gosh,
Rebecca.
it's
Um,
wonderful to meet you. I get to see you on chats. I first met you, I think, actually on Beard of Darkness with his chat. And I was just excited because, like, you're just the sweetest guy and you do all the writing and everything like that. And I was like, holy cow, you're a celebrity. You're the swankiest man on YouTube. You really are. That is the vibe, is just so, it's totally like a Robert Palmer, like 1980s vibe. You're just looking all slick and everything. It looks awesome.
Thanks. That's very sweet of you to say. It's funny. There was a TV show called Daredevil. It's based on a superhero I'm a fan
Oh,
of.
yeah, I know. Yeah.
The first season poster, that's what that profile picture is. It's me, except I don't have blood on myself because like
Good
I don't want.
job.
I'm
Good
not
job.
I mean I can be tech savvy and I know how to edit some stuff, but I don't know how to like do any of that stuff. It's been a long time since I've used Photoshop.
You're doing great. You're doing great, babe.
But oh man. Well, I won't pretend that you're the first indie author I've had on here, but I think you're
Oh,
the first like Iron Age author I've had on here.
oh
I
really?
think. I'm still not entirely sure what that is, cause well,
Well, if you want me to tell you, I can a little bit about it. Actually, I was start the term actually was coined pretty much by Razor Fist. He was talking about an age of iron where people would create their own things, and iron being, of course, a useful metal. It's not just like, unlike gold and silver, which are primarily because of their beauty. That's fine. That's beautiful things, the golden age and silver age. But iron creates, iron defends, iron actually is lifted in battle. And this is a battle for the heart and soul of culture. And so we had wanted to encourage anybody who feels that they are not being served by corporate culture, because corporate culture, we have a lot of beautiful things out there. We have a lot of wonderful IPs. I go way back and used to just love Superman was my homeboy. Loved Batman, Justice League, any of those things. Batman, the animated series, I consider to be probably the apex of animation. Really,
I
honestly,
mean it's
along with
my
Samurai
favorite
Jack.
animated show, so I'll happily
Yeah,
agree with you on that.
yeah, and so loved all those things, and it really it breaks the heart when you see what's happening to those IPs, and when you understand that is how you destroy a nation, is you destroy its heroes. Those pantheons are cultural, uh, mythological creatures in America. They are a secular pantheon of demigods that we have, or the superheroes, and our cherished traditions and things like that. We wanted to encourage people to write what they know, write what they love, to not have to go through gatekeepers, through publishers that are trying to stop people from writing the things that they know and love, and to go out, whoever you are, no matter where you're from, and no matter what your culture might be, whether it's the griot culture of Africa, or if you have the storytelling bards of Europe in your system, or the oral traditions of the Native Americans, or the great Vedas of India, you have this heroic culture that needs to be spoken. And right now, corporations do not speak that. They do not speak those languages. They have been taking down so many of these icons. They have been taking out so many authors that would write those heroic stories that everyone loves. And so we said, you know what, you can do it on your own. And so we're encouraging people to get out and to write, to draw, to sing, to create, without looking to a corporation to feed it to you as part of a corporate committee or an AI impersonation of a human. Go out and write it yourself. Try your hand. The worst thing you can do is that only you love it. But in that case, you've written something you love. And so Iron Age is about creation. It's about forging new culture from ourselves and from our own hearts, and taking away that dependence on corporate culture. We don't need to be fed culture. We can create it.
That's a good sales pitch. It's an interesting sales pitch.
I
Though
appreciate it.
yeah, no it's interesting because like I try to keep my channel uh, what's the not drama well I do want to keep it drama
Positive.
free. I try to keep things. Yeah, exactly. Thank you. I try to keep things positive on this channel because, in all honesty, I don't really want to. I want to talk with as many people as I can.
Well, it's fabulous, and not only that, but that's what I love about your channel. I was looking at some of your stuff, and it not only is positive, and that is what we need for culture. We don't want to go in and hate watch something. There are things that are actually pretty good out there. There's some things that I love. I'm a huge Fallout fan. I'm excited because I actually kind of want to go in and I want to see how the series matches up with the game, because I love the game. It's a big influence on my own series, and I was like, have they killed it for me? Because Sharon from Fallout 3 is like my homeboy, and I just love him so much, and so I don't want them to ruin him for me. But when you find good things, let's talk about those great things, those good things that we do love. And I saw that in your channel, and I think it's a wonderful idea.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say I'm not a big I'm not really into Razor Fist, although well, I watch his channel a little bit, but yeah, no, it's.
Well, he has a different take. He has a kind of a different angle with stuff, and like you, I like to do a variety of different YouTube channelers, because I think that there's so much to learn from each other. I love I haven't met somebody yet that I was like, oh, I don't like what they're doing. It takes all of us, and it's not just the big creators that deserve to be heard. It's some of these little guys. Like, so actually, you've got an audience already, so you're really blessed. But there's a lot of folks that have just started out. Maybe they've got 10 or something like that.
Yeah, I have what's called a cult following at the moment.
You do. I know it. I was reading the comments, and I was just thrilled, because it's like you actually have community here, which that's what a lot of things are missing right now is real organic community. And you do. This is not something you paid for. It's not something you have bots farming out. You literally have people that have grown up around you who love you, that they come on because they want to see what you have to say, and you can't buy that. There is no amount of bot farming that's going to bring the kind of community you have. And to read your comments, to read the people on your list, they're the kind of people I want to know. And that's you've done something a lot of people would pay an enormous amount of money for, and you did it on your own. So congratulations, Britton.
Yeah, my parents are always like, "Hey, so when are you gonna get like monetized?" I'm like, I think that'll be a long time from now. I'm not too worried about that.
With Stephen He, it was like with Stephen He, where are you a YouTuber?
Yeah, my parents are not as savvy on YouTube as well. I mean, I'm still figuring it out as I'm going along. I've had a couple of channels over the years, and this one I settled on because I'm like, this is stuff I'm actually passionate about. So,
you're doing great. You're way ahead of me. My channel is literally like, I don't know, a mishmash of like, I can't even explain what's on it. It's like I do my book, and then I'll have like, oh, I heard the birds sing. I think I'll make like a 30-second video on birds or something like that. And it's just little weird things about being in Texas, and about being a writer, or part of what we do is it's just as human beings. You've actually got a theme going, and you're doing pretty well with it.
Oh, you live in Texas, huh? That's
right there.
You're right. You're right below us. Like, I'm in Oklahoma.
I know. No, we share a border. We're not at war or anything like that. Some people will say "Boomer Sooner," and then suddenly there's like the fist fight and starting everything. No, you're fine. I actually know the Boomer Sooner song, so Boom Sooner, Boom Sooner, Boom Sooner. I know it. So I wanted to speak the language of your people. Hello, hello, Sooner.
I'm wearing my Flash shirt today, so yeah.
Are you really?
Yeah.
Good job.
Yeah. Well, I was talking with some friends of mine, and they're like, "Oh, do you like the Flash?" I'm like, "Well, yeah. I like this shirt a lot. It's really."
I'm actually I am super into the retro stuff, and because I am retro.
Do you read like? So have you read like the comics, or have you only watched like the films and stuff? Or
I actually read the comics. So when I was growing up, and so just so your people know, I'm 61. I'm older than dirt. I have shoes older than you. I literally have like.
I think you look nice for 61. I have to say, I would have thought you were in like your 40s or something.
And that's how you know I'm old, because I'm not crying because you said I was in my 40s. They'd be like, yeah, I look like I'm 40. You turn 61 something, you're like, woohoo, I look like I'm 40. I'm cool with that. It's like, yeah, I just shaved off 20 years. No, actually, I wasn't allowed to read comics when I was a kid, because My parents wanted me to read novels. They wanted me to read books, and they were super. They knew we only had a little bit amount of time, so they're like, "Oh, you go do this." I totally got into Huey, Dewey, and Louie. I picked up one of those ones. I got into the Archie comics, and then I worked my way into DC and Marvel, primarily DC. The greatness of Jack Kirby. I love Jack Kirby. I wish I could draw like Jack Kirby. I can't, but I try. I love Jack Kirby. And so I got into that, and I wasn't able to get into the serious, like I know serious readers. They are serious lovers of the lore. Because I wasn't really, I had to sneak it out, so I would get a little bit here and a little bit there. And then of course, I was still reading, Conan the Barbarian. I was reading those books before the films ever came out. So the cool part about being old is I got to read it before we had the films. I had the comics. And so I got to watch the first Superman movie, actually, which was Christopher Reeves. Saw it in the theater, and was just blown away.
That must have been awesome.
Dude, it was so magical. I love that image of Superman. When we talk about that pantheon of demigods, the secular mythology of America, that's Superman. He's the one. He's literally a person that comes here and he's an immigrant, and he's an alien, and he comes in and he creates this world around himself where he becomes a part of it, but also he becomes the defender and the supporter. And I love that ideal. And Reeves nailed it. He absolutely nailed it to the wall. It was perfect. And to see it on the big screen like that, and to realize that he had brought this character to life, the score is fabulous. It's still one of my main pieces of music that I go to when I need to set up a scene or feel inspired to write. I go to that score, and just it was incredible. I got to see that one, and I also got to see Star Wars in the theater, first time out in 1977, and it was mind blowing. It was an absolute. It opened my eyes. I have a great love for the original Star Wars. My dad was with me when we saw it, and he literally jumped up out of his chair when they blew up the Death Star, and I became a lifelong passionate fan of Star Wars and of Star Trek, which we're not supposed to beams. They're not supposed to cross. You're never supposed to wear, both uniforms. I loved both of them. My dad was in the space program, and Star Trek was an example of what we thought the world could be. And so I grew up with this. I got to see it like on a black and white TV. I got to see the moon landing, cool stuff like that. And when you live through that, and then you see these properties and the potential for what they have, and the magic of storytelling as it's meant to be this epic, grand scale. Film is its own medium. Not everything is meant to be a screenplay, but when it's well done, a screenplay and a well-written film tells you everything you need to know. 2.5 hours, you're done. And you can look up and go, that's the greatest story I've ever heard. It's incredible to see it done perfectly in film. And I would say that probably the translation of Superman as Christopher Reeves probably was one of the best adaptations I've ever seen. I still haven't met anything that really remotely transcends what he did with that moment in time.
Yeah, no, I agree. I'll admit that I'm more of a Batman fan, but I have a respect for Superman. Like, like when he's done well, like he's done great. Like I've read All-Star Superman, which is probably my favorite Superman story of all time. I also have a soft spot for the movie because I really like it. Was one of the first films I remember seeing when I was a kid alongside Star Wars. I used to have this little Superman costume too. I don't know why, but
I bet you were so cute. Well, yeah, the world's okay. So Batman is also. I got to see the Batman series when I was a kid, and we're talking about Adam West. We're talking about the old one, and I was actually deaf at the time. I couldn't hear. I've since had my hearing restored, but you could love Batman without hearing a word because literally he's just fist fighting the heck out of stuff, and the characters were so over the top. It was very campy. It was very different. So when I get introduced to Batman, I get introduced to him really through Frank Miller. Now, I saw Bob Kane's thing. I was more of a Superman fiend when I was younger. My introduction to Batman, and this is before The Dark Knight Returns, we start looking at Frank Miller with Sin City. And Frank Miller's Batman, and I love his character. I know it's kind of cliche now, but at the time, the darkness of Batman and that characterization of him as a tortured soul, he did it best, and he takes Batman to a whole new level. Well, when we go through that transformation of Batman. He originally had been that detective. He was the everyman who goes out and he's a rich guy, but he's just this dude. He doesn't have superpowers. He's got smarts. And that is the reason why when you go to Justice League, it is Bruce Wayne. It's Batman. He's the one that's in control of everything. Superman is always trying to power himself down. He is trying to keep himself from overwhelming his surroundings. Always. He lives constantly in fear of destroying. As in the case of the Dark Side work where they had or Apocalypse Now, excuse me, where they had Dan Turpin and just how angry he was. He was trying to hold himself back. Well, Bruce Wayne, Batman, is constantly trying to power himself up. He's always this guy that isn't trying to hold back. Instead, he's trying to go over the top, and that brings him into leadership. So that dynamic of the ordinary man who, despite all of his wealth and everything else, is just a guy like you and me, versus Superman, who is constantly trying to hold back to keep from becoming the monster he could be. And so both of them meet in the middle with this. And one of the reasons I love the Justice League series so much with Bruce Timm and the animation there, along with Batman.
Oh, it's fun. It might be my favorite DC adaptation I've ever seen.
It is. I love it.
Everyone's like, oh man, the Snyderverse. I'm like, well, I got my animated show right here.
I know.
I'll be good. I'm good to go.
Now, honestly, okay, so the perfection of this, literally, okay. So when I first see Batman,
I also grew up watching it, so I'm definitely biased when I say this.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong. I didn't grow up seeing it. I was a 31-year-old single mother. I had a TV that sounded like a bomb fixing to go off. We were so broke. And literally, I would turn it on. It would start to make a high-pitched squeal. You could only go 30 minutes. It would start to go, and you'd be like, it's going to blow up, man. It's going to blow up. When I got so broke, I had to pawn everything. No one would take it. They sent it back. It was that broken. Every day after school, I was like, hey, we got to go home, honey. Guess what? We're going to go watch Batman. Because, dude, I had to be there. It was that good. Conroy was that good. And that world that they create and the worlds that come out of it, you go from Batman the Animated Series to Man of Steel to, and I said, I love Batman the Animated Series, the one where he meets the Grey Ghost is probably the hype. Because
the Grey Ghost is Adam West.
Yes, the Grey Ghost. That is my past meeting my teacher. I idolized Adam West as a child, and then I see, as an adult, I see the Grey Ghost with Bruce Wayne as, Batman as Kevin Conroy, because they are the same. I don't care what you do. Kevin's the man.
I actually glanced.
I'm blown away.
I actually glanced upon Kevin Conroy when I went to a con a few years ago. I didn't have the courage to walk up to him because he was kind of walking. He had this little tank with him.
Yeah.
I was crushed when I heard he died. I was like, man, I wish I walked up and that was a great loss. I mean,
it was huge. I think that his personification, how he brings Batman to life. First of all, it's the voice itself. When he talked about how he created the voice of Batman, Conroy literally digs deep and he brings out this, I'm the Batman. He has this, actually really, I think it's right here.
And I love the cadence of his performance. I love how his Bruce Wayne is different from Batman. So where it's not because everyone likes to make fun of the fact, seriously, he's running around with a costume. Wouldn't Bruce Wayne be the first suspect? But no, his Bruce Wayne is this kind of easygoing guy, and his voice is very similar. And Batman, he's very serious,
Yes, well, Bruce Wayne is his shadow side. Bruce Wayne is his playboy persona, and he does it well. He's one of the Conroy did Bruce Wayne so well, and the writing was so on point with this, and the writers did a fantastic job with it because they created Bruce Wayne as a sympathetic character. They could have made him this jerk. And some of them do, where he's, always just a playboy. He doesn't really care. He's rich. Bruce Wayne runs a business. He runs the business. He treats his employees right. He knows who they are. But he's also a guy that has a lot of fun. So you're right. There's this different cadence to his voice. There's this different feeling. Literally, Conroy could take that character, make Bruce Wayne come to life, switch on a dime, become I'm the Batman. And all of a sudden, he is that dark side. He is that person that struggles with fear and doubt and death and grief. And he never loses his humanity. and that constant, the one where he's holding the hand with the little girl. I've forgotten the name of the episode.
Oh, that's the Justice League. That's one of my favorite moments of the
Yeah,
Timverse.
absolutely. And I know that some of the writers were the same, and we had a lot of the same illustrators. But Conroy they worked with Conroy. They didn't run over him. This is the respect between the voice actors and the animators and the writers. It was so perfect. It's the reason why when I tell people like, they're like, well, maybe I was biased. I grew up with it. No, you weren't. You weren't biased. You were right. Children know. They know greatness when they see it.
Well, I mean, growing up with it helped a lot. I do love it. I do think it's like I like Jon Stewart Green Lantern over Hal Stewart Green Lantern because of the Justice League TV show.
I know. I'm like, oh man.
I remember when I read some Green Lantern comics and it was Hal. I was like, what is this? Where's Black Guy at?
Well, they were hitting it so well with the characters, and I had grown up with some of these characters, with the Green Arrow and Black Canary and all of these people. They brought these characters to life. The people that they chose to bring them to life knew something about the characters. They knew, they had studied these guys, and they kept the characters alive in the way that those of us who grew up with them knew them, but they brought their own magic to it. And it takes teamwork to do that. When you have great animators meeting with great voice actors, meeting with great writers, and they go, the writing, you have to know your voice actor. You can say, hey, wait, I know that Kevin Conroy can pull this off. That part where he sings Am I Blue? Yes, they did it because they knew Kevin could sing it. And the interplay between him and Diana as Wonder Woman, where she's like, and of course you have Little Magician Girl. Dang it, she just skipped my mind. She's sort of sweet on him too, but they both just loved it so much. They knew Kevin could do this, so the writers made it possible for us to have that moment from Batman himself, from Kevin, because he could sing this fantastic scene. That marries in with the Man of Steel episode where Dan Turpin dies, and we see it, and I know that you've seen it, but if you don't get it, go and find the funeral of Jack Kirby on Man of Steel, the animated series. It is extraordinary. That scene where Dan Turpin is buried, it's actually Jack Kirby's funeral, and the Fantastic Four, when it played live, because I watched it, Fantastic Four shows up. All of our characters from the Marvel Universe, anybody that Kirby was related to, shows up in that pan shot. And there is one version of that on YouTube. I found it. And I'll probably go back and download it and make sure I sneak it in on my Linux box with YouTube DL, because it's amazing. And they only ran it once because you literally ran over everything between all the walls came down between Marvel and DC, because Jack Kirby brought these people together in such a way when he created these characters. And so they brought them out. And those writers on Man of Steel, even though you have this DC story, Dan Turpin is based on Jack Kirby and his heroism at the end, where he's literally just this guy fighting for everything that he believes in. He goes out there and he literally stands up to the mob and sacrifices himself. And Superman realizes he doesn't have to save everything if people will just stand up for themselves, if they will just stand up for what they believe in, and they are free people who will fight against the tyrant. And so they go after him, and literally that moment where Superman turns and the crowd is following him, he's not just a superhero, he's an inspiration. And Dan Turpin, based on Jack Kirby's character, is that moment in that series, and it pulls it all together, and everything comes together under that, and it is electrifying when I saw it alive, to see that moment. That was the writers, that was the illustrators, that was the voice actors. Everybody came together, and that is why that set of series with Justice League, Batman, and the Superman series are
Don't
probably
forget Batman Beyond.
Yes, they're yes, yeah, and Batman Beyond actually too. I actually loved it. They're as close to perfect as I think you'll ever get, and I really don't need anything else from that. I don't need it to be rehashed, because I have seen. And I will say, yes, I'm sure that somebody can do it. They can do a great job.
Yeah, I saw someone the other day going like, oh, we should have a Justice League 07. And someone literally was just like, we already got a great ending to that Justice League show.
We did.
We don't need to do any more with it. And I'm like, yes, that. Oh.
No, great storytelling. It doesn't have to be rehashed. Now, there's things.
I mean,
you
it
can
would be
do.
nice seeing those characters again, of course, but
Yeah,
like it felt like it ended at a good place.
it did. And endings are important, and I think this is where we're sometimes missing it now. And corporate culture, they're going back to that same well over and over again. They don't want it to die. As a writer, one of the things I have to do is I have to say this has an ending somewhere. There is a place where the lights go down and a character will be gone and somebody else takes up the torch, because that's life. That's real. We have to pass ourselves. We have to pass ourselves on somehow. And we can only do it when somebody steps off the stage, sings that last song, and then takes their bow and hands that torch off to the next person. That's not just an ending, it's a legacy. And that's what Justice League America, that's what they gave us. That is a legacy. And I think that the animated series is as close as you'll ever see to the perfection of a marriage of comic with acting with the magic of animation. And
I
I
agree.
think that it really touches all of it.
You put it very beautifully. Though I will note real quick, I have a kind of funny anecdote about Jack Kirby.
Yes.
I didn't take to his art style at first. I always like thought it was kind of blocky and like ugly,
I mean,
and I was like, why the hell do his characters look like apes sometimes? Okay,
I know.
whatever. And I grew to appreciate it more as I've grown older. I watched this like documentary that's on YouTube about just comic artists who've talking about Kirby. Some
Yeah.
of them, the first thing they're like is like, I didn't really get to it at first. I'm like, well,
That's
I'm glad
right.
I'm not alone there. I'll
No,
admit, I'm a big fan of Steve Ditko in terms of the big like
oh,
Marvel artists. I really enjoy his style. He's a one of a kind. Also his story is really interesting as well because he did Marvel for a while and then he was like,
yeah.
I'm gonna go do my thing over here. Did Charlton Comics for a while.
Yeah.
Did his kind of independent, weird, objectivist comics, and he basically died. Pretty much. They even did a documentary about him, which I liked a lot. Where Jonathan Ross tries to find him, and they do. It's really good.
Oh wow, I gotta see this. I had not seen this yet.
Um, Also, it's interesting because like his influence is often understated. I mean,
Yes.
Watchmen probably wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for Steve Ditko.
Yeah.
Shade the Changing Man, Hawk and Dove. He created Hawk and Dove, of course. Spider-Man, one of my favorite superheroes. But yeah, Ditko's great. He's wonderfully strange. No pun intended.
It's the weirdness of as you roll through the 70s and 80s, you have this Bane show up in comics.
It's sort of a similar thing with Kirby too, because he could get weird too.
Oh yeah, well yeah, he did. And he would just have these weird, strange ideas. And there's so many characters he did that it's so hard to get your handle on all of them. And honestly, it was hard for me to catch up. It's like watching a soap opera, literally like your granny soap operas. Kirby takes this thing and it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And there's so many characters. There's this whole world, the universes that are in play. And his grasp of the multi-universe was really the thing I think that propelled that into the limelight. But as you come through the 70s and 80s, you also had people that they would part ways with Marvel, they'd part ways with DC. They would go out and they would create these little properties that become huge. And Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles is really the apex of that movement. And Ditko is actually influential in them also, because you look at the weird darkness of the first comics that come out with Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, a whole different thing. In fact, I've got a friend that actually has Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles 1 when they're still all wearing, I think, the red bandanas and stuff like that. And just reading it as a form of indie art, as something that people would get out and they just get fed up with a rat race or whatever, and they would go out and they would create something different, something they hadn't seen before. And so that's where we have the birth of these characters, is actually in the indie movement. And that's one of the reasons why when we talk about the Iron Age, we want people to, you don't have to be married to a publishing house. You don't have to wait for somebody to recognize you. Come out and do these things. These guys did it before. We wouldn't have Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles if they hadn't broken free and made what they wanted to make.
Or Cerberus. I haven't read Cerberus, but
I haven't read Cerberus much. I've got to go out and I actually need to get a compendium where I just go, guys, I want you to send me a comic I should read. I already know what I've read in the past. There's things I know I'm missing. There's things that I know are so great that I haven't laid my eyes onto. Um, Weapon Brown, I think is the other one. It's actually Charlie Brown. If he was like super post-apocalyptic and everything was crazy.
I do love the Peanuts. I'm kind of interested in
Yeah.
checking that out when you say that.
Yeah, I know. No, I loved it. I was a great Peanuts fan. I would always have these little back when people would actually read the Sunday comics. You would get a comic every week in your newspaper, and it would have it would have serials and it would have everything else, and we'd sit down and read them, and they would be in color. You'd be like, cool. It was like the biggest day of the week. You'd get all the comics out. So we did read those, and there were serialized stories in there. Well, Weapon Brown is pretty much. I think I'm getting it right. Weapon Brown, because I followed it, and it was just it was out every comic character that's ever been written. And Charlie Brown turns into this, like a dark, brooding character, and it's very graphic. It is extremely. It can be a little bit if you don't want to get into profanity or whatever. You're probably going to be sad, and it's a little nudity or something. But it's still a great piece of work. And those weird one-offs that we see where it spins into this storyline that takes over the imagination of the person reading it and the person writing it. That's the beauty of indie comics. When you go in and you find that one that just hits you just right, and it may not ever turn into a huge property, but it is something that influences you as a creator on YouTube. And you know what the ones are that you have in your back of your mind, and not just the ones that you share with the group, like Batman, the animated series. But there are things that you saw that only you saw. Maybe your friends didn't ever get into it, but you saw it, you loved it, and it forms in your mind the creator that you have become. And we have to love that about ourselves too. If I'm just niche, if I end up being a niche, I have an unusual genre because it doesn't really fit any genre in particular. It's a sci-fi Western post-apocalyptic revolutionary romance. It's hard to kind of figure out which one that is. But if that's what I am, if I'm this niche person, but it influences great authors to do great things, then I'm cool with that. I would love for it to go big and people want to read the franchise and to do all the play TTRPG. But it's cool to be an indie. Also, it's cool to be something that's an acquired taste where somebody goes, hey, guess what? I found this thing, and it's not the big thing yet. It's still great to do that. It's fun.
I mean, I hope you don't mind a little pushback, but like one of the things that kind of irritates me a little bit about the Iron Age, I'm like, do these guys know that like Image Comics and Dark Horse Comics exist?
Oh,
like, there's a lot of great comics from those companies, like Invincible. Like, you want a superhero comic?
Oh, yeah.
Here, let me.
No, Invincible's fantastic. I've heard a lot of great stuff about Invincible.
I have 3 of these gigantic books. Fantastic stuff, though, and the show's very good too. There's
yeah.
I'm like, guys, you're this isn't the 1960s. Like, we could go. It's not just Marvel and DC anymore. Like, you can go to now they want to create their own stuff. That's fine. But like when they, I don't know if you do this because I've only just met you not too long ago. But I'm like, there's all these great comics that like people aren't seeing, and it kind of frustrates me a little bit.
Well, the whole point of Iron Age is simply to encourage people to get out there, that they don't have to be force-fed something from a corporation. And that actually is part of the whole thing, is can you get these people in front of somebody? And this is where the creators on YouTube come in. Because when you see something you love, when you're finding that little niche market, that little piece, and Invincible isn't really niche anymore, so it's gone big. It's out there now. But you have a lot of those same properties out there. There are creators who do fantastic work. The difference right now in the indie movement as opposed to the indie movement of the 60s and 70s is we were still going through print media. If you could swing it, you could go out there, you could find somebody to underwrite you. You now have a larger corporations are each other. There's a lot of the smaller ones that are getting gobbled up in the big picture. Mm-hmm. And at first it looks good, but then you start to lose the properties. They take them down, or they say, well, we're not going to publish this anymore. And this has happened repeatedly throughout. And that's why we need to make sure that we as a culture have ways of doing our own thing, that we don't have to go through a print publisher if we cannot find one. We can print ourselves. And that actually is, it's kind of like indie music. When you actually open up, but indie music's always been there. It's always been out there. We just you couldn't record each time because you might not have a studio. You had to go find a studio. Now I can literally sit down. I can turn on my phone. It may not be the best sound in the world, but I can make music. I can get my music in front of people. And so the same. Now the question is, will YouTube let me? Are they going to copy strike me because I sound like somebody or something? That's the intrusion, the corporate intrusion. When AI and corporations start to come in and say, well, you sound like somebody and I own that property, so I'm not going to let you be here. Now,
well, I mean, I don't want to do that. I mean, you know,
yeah.
I want to let people read whatever they want, but it's just kind of like, you know.
No, you're right that there are good things out there, and it's one of the, and actually not all Iron Age authors are like that, or Iron Age people, because we just want to see indies. We don't care which way they come. If you're self-published, that's great. If you find a small publishing houses are going to be the wave of the future, because big publishing is running into a lot of problems, especially when we talk about literature itself. And yes, the comics industry, one of the things that this big revolution with anime and manga, and you're saying, well, how do you compete with that? Well, you compete with it through great storylines. You compete with it through different, going out and actually creating these worlds, because anime and manga people, there's an arc. Like Berserk is a prime example of, there's an arc and you go through it and you actually have something happens to this character, and the stories eventually end. Things happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's one I often recommend. I do like Berserk. I'm very picky with manga, which this is gonna be kind of funny since, you know, I read comics about guys in leotards beating up criminals, but there's a lot of it that's really silly.
I know. Well,
again, I expect the pushback and people making fun of me because I like superhero comics, but like, I don't know, and there's a lot of things people forget, like.
Yeah.
The people who did manga and anime, they were inspired by us. Like,
that's right.
The guy who created Astro Boy was a huge fan of Disney.
Oh yeah. Astro
Carl
Boy.
Barks. I haven't read Carl Barks, but I know that I can't. It's Osamu Tezuka, I think. You can correct pronunciation if I'm wrong. Yeah, he was a big fan of Carl Barks, you know. So it's not just. So I find it interesting how we borrowed from each other over time, and how anime has become this big thing.
It's become a big thing, but in reality, yes, it is now reaching. I'll say this much: anime is evolving, and so is the Marvel, DC superhero universes, and the stage is ripe for the next phase. And it doesn't matter what you call it. If you call it Iron Age, if you call it Comicsgate, if you call it mainstream publishing, the next idea that comes out has to be fresh and new. It can't be something that's simply just owned by a company that keeps creating the same thing. It's going to be artists and musicians and writers and animators and illustrators who have their own style, their own idea, and you won't know which one it is until you put it out there. That's the magic of it. It may be somebody who's been out there for a long time. It may be Chuck Dixon or Eric July, or it might be Ethan Van Sciver. It may be Aaron Lopresti going out and doing his old school DC stuff and just hammering a storyline that we've heard before, but in a new and fresh way. But no one will know until we do it. And the biggest thing that we can do as a culture is to get ourselves out there to write what we love, to make those dreams reality. And if somebody loves it, that is fantastic. If the world finds it and becomes suddenly turned on to everything we've done, then that's fantastic too. And if only I ever see it and it's wonderful, it's still wonderful. We don't know what's going to happen. So the only way you'll ever know is to create. Get out there, write it, sing it, do it. As a TTRPG player, I was one of the, back when D&D first started, I was part of that movement. And I love TTRPGs. I always tell them, you write what you play what you love, and you game on. If somebody says, you're not going to be allowed to do this, then write one of your own. It literally is that simple. You go out and you say, you know what? I've got a piece of paper. I've got some dice. I can go ahead and I can create a game, and I can play it, and I'll play the one I love. I don't have to wait for a corporate overlord to hand me something in my hand and say, here you go. This is all you get. I can create something on my own, and I can share it with my friends. And if they love it, they'll share it too.
Yeah, it's kind of what I've found interesting about the rise of, I mean, if you want to call it indie publishing. I mean, not just the Iron Age. I mean, there's people like Tori Tekken from Tori Talks, or Andrew Meredith, who are basically telling their own stories, and they're not using a publisher. I mean, they're relatively successful. I'm hoping they don't take that the wrong way. I respect both of them immensely. I've tried getting Tori on this show, but I think she just got sick of me asking her. So she's
No.
like,
I know nobody's gonna get sick of you.
even though like she's gone on other streams, I'm like, dang it, I need to find a good time to. We need to get her on. I need to get her on, and we're gonna have a good time.
It'll happen, and here's the reason why: because you are giving a platform to people like me that want to be heard. And Tori is one of those people. She's out there. And here's a secret about the publishing industry, and it's one of the things people don't understand. 95% of published authors will only sell 1,000 books or less. 95% of them. There are only 50 authors, approximately. This was from a couple of years ago. There are only 50 authors that sold over 500,000 books. The rest of them, they're actually selling about as much as Tori Tekken or anybody else. In fact, Tori's probably beating them. Tori's probably sold more. You just won't know it.
Or one of the reasons, my friend Joe Byrne as well. I actually just recently read Wistful Ascending from him, which I liked a lot. I mean, if you like superhero stuff, read it. It's great. It's really good.
To see, okay, and this is where this magic is happening. We have people who grew up with the greatness of Kevin Conroy and Batman Animated, and they are writing and creating now, and they are the ones that are making these books and things happen, and they're taking these storylines and they're creating new ones. And so you literally have a culture that was created that now is being created by you guys, and it is indie. It's actually out there on its own, whether you call it Iron Age or anything else.
Well, I mean,
it's still its own. It's new, and they are beating what we call the older publishing houses, because in reality, so many of their sales were just to the bookstores themselves. They would count it as 30,000 books. Well, it was sold to Barnes and Noble, or it was sold to somebody else, and then they would say, "How many of those did you sell?" There may have only been 30 that were sold.
I mean, I also kind of find it interesting, since we've sort of seen this rise of creator-owned, and I mean, comics were doing it before before self-publishing actually became a thing, and it wasn't just vanity projects anymore.
Yeah.
I think it's really interesting that I'm always saying, like, we're kind of in a new golden age, because like we can tell any stories we want to tell. There's no more comic codes. There's nothing holding us back. So I mean, I guess I agree with you on that sense. We should go out and tell the stories we want to tell. I agree with you on that.
I think you're doing a fantastic job with it. Here's the thing. You're telling a story as well. You as a content creator on YouTube are telling a story about the industry. You're telling a story about the people who write. You actually create a cast of characters and you bring them in, and they tell you what they've done. You're sitting here right now and you're telling me about Tori and other people. You are creating a story about creators. And people don't realize what importance this is in YouTube. And right now it's YouTube. It'll be some other platform later. There'll always be something new. But when we have people like you, the critics and the dreamers and the people who envision what culture can be, you're the creators of a new museum. You're the creators of a curator of a collection.
I like how that sounds.
You're a curator of these things. You find things you love and you go, well, this looks shiny, and you're going to put it on the shelf. And one day you have this beautiful collection and you go, I want to share this. I would like to share it with more than just me. You put your camera down and you turn on the screen, and now the world is able to see what it was you put together. It's a collection of incredible beauty. I know what you're thinking right now, because you're looking at something you love, and you actually have created this beautiful shelf of works by people that you admire, and you want more people to know it. That's curation. That is actually the guardian of the culture, are those who curate these collections and keep them shared to other people. As we go into the homes and we see the immense inbox action figures, and whether it's Warhammer or BattleTech or anything else, and then we see as those creators move on, and we see as Blaine Pardo has now moved on to create Land and Sea and Blue Dawn series, a whole new era of stompy robots is here. We have literally seen this just explosion of interest. Why? Before, maybe you might meet 10 people in the real world that you would know that loved Warhammer. Dude, I know so many people that know lore now, because I love reading Warhammer lore. Warhammer lore. I get it right. Warhammer lore. Why? Because people like you Put it out there. We had fan-based.
That's one of those I'm a little intimidated to try, because the lore just seems so big. I'm like, oh my gosh.
It is. It's huge.
Then again, I'm a huge like Star Wars fan, and like I ashamedly know a lot about it. I know a lot about it. So.
You are fine. It's the Star Wars. I love Star Wars as I knew it. I'm not so sure about where it's going. I know what I loved about it. I know what I enjoyed with it, and I know what seemed to work.
I mean, I also like Trek. I often like to call myself a lapsed Trekkie, but I'm more of a Star Wars guy. I mean, nothing against Star Trek. I think Star Trek has some great stuff. I mean, Deep Space Nine is great.
Well, Deep Space Nine is an absolute treasure, and it was one of the best actually out of the whole series. I think with Star Wars, the thing that's different about Star Wars versus Star Trek is a more it's in bite-sized pieces. Going through a particular point in that universe, even with all the different timeline variations and things like that, it is that one piece as we follow them through, as we follow mankind as they go to the stars. It is a space opera, and it goes this way. But Star Wars was first put out there as a space western. It has a more mythical feel to it. It is into the realm of space fantasy. And
I would agree with that.
Yes, it's the knights are there. They're the knights. You have the rogue, which is the typical rogue, which will be your gunslinger is Han Solo. Yes, he shot first. Fight me, because I saw it when it came out. The same thing we have with Luke. He is the knight, the monk knight, basically, who comes out, and he rides in. He has a pure heart, and he saves the day. Leia is the queen. She is the princess. She comes in and she shoots and she fights. She is actually the warrior of the group, because she picks up a gun and shoots just like everybody else. Whereas Han Solo is the rogue. He is doing all the machinations behind the scenes and getting the Millennium Falcon together. He's actually doing the diplomatic missions, believe it or not, even though he's doing it at the point of a gun. He makes deals. He goes out and he makes sure that he can get from point A to point B by paying somebody a little money under the table, or escaping Jabba the Hutt, or taking a payment in advance. Leia is actually the warrior at that point. She's the one who's actually there just purely to fight and to lead an army. So we have these characters that they are fantasy characters. They fit in well with, and like I said, the first
in a science fiction setting.
Yes, it's in a science fiction setting, but it is a fantasy, and it breaks the genre. And the genre is, at the time we came in, Star Wars comes in. It calls itself a space western, and there's bar fights and all that kind of cool stuff. And that was actually the trailer that came out at the time, and it was how it was built. And so you had this sort of weird little space story, and we see it from where we are, as it is classic space Star Wars, science fiction. But when you're coming at it from before it's released and into the first part of it, it varies from our science fiction and space stories, because it is not just hard science fiction. It's not just we're basing it on this type of science or this type of thing. It is a religion. It has knights. It has rogues. It has warriors, and it has swords. And that was probably the biggest thing. It is a sword and sorcery fantasy set in outer space, and it literally breaks the mold for everything. And so,
well, I kind of more thought of it as kind of like an epic fantasy in space. But yeah, you could get away with calling it a sword and sorcery, because like when I think of sword and maybe sword and planet, if you want to go
sword and planet,
really
well,
old.
That comes from.
That's a deep cut. I'd be shocked if anyone actually like it. Maybe my friend Liam or Raph knows what Sword and Planet is, but yeah, that's a deep
I know
cut.
what Sword and Planet is. I love it. Actually, you're looking at John Carter of Mars as Sword and Planet. You're looking at that genre of it, sort of like Conan in outer space.
Did you watch the John Carter movie? Because I watched it a few years ago. It was actually pretty good. I liked it.
I have not gotten to see it, actually, and I need to. I looked at it and I heard it was actually pretty decent by some folks. Others were like, "Nah." I read the book and I loved it, so really.
I'm more into like Robert E. Howard in terms of like pulp, because like Burroughs is really imaginative, but like I don't know, there's just like there's just a vitality in something like Conan that I'm just like,
Robert E. Howard, I love Robert E. Howard. He was super formative for me. Now, I veer more towards the romance part of my genre, but Conan is the that style.
I mean,
approach,
Conan's pretty manly, so I mean, you know.
Oh, dude, no, men can be romantic. That's the thing that people don't get. It's not romance. It's one
Oh
of the
yeah,
reasons.
Queen of the Black Coast is a great love story if you
Yes.
really think about
Yeah.
it.
There's that part we forget that men actually wrote romance for a long time. That was and not what you think of romance.
Even Jack
now.
Kirby did romance comics for a while
Yes.
because superheroes were out of fad during World War II, I think.
Yeah. Well, part of it is it was just hot at the time because you had women being the largest portion of readers because they were at home. Guys were overseas fighting. Who's going to buy your stuff? The women who are left behind who dream of having somebody that will sweep them up. But men's romance and women's romances are different. And one of the things I always have to stress to my readers, my romance sounds like the Ivanhoe and Conan the Barbarian.
So do you mean? So are you meaning romance in like a different like in a different way than how most people might think romance? Because like when you say romance, that might throw some people off.
No, I'd say that's the reason why I don't bill it as a romance. Actually, I bill it as a sci-fi western, an post-apocalyptic sci-fi western about a revolution.
Sounds Fallouty.
It is. It's Fallouty. I love Fallout. I said it's a very formative series for me as a gamer. I love gaming. I've been there for a long time. Been gaming pretty much since the 1970s. Started with Pong, worked my way up through all of the rest, and ended up playing Doom and several other. I was big on arcade. Moved to consoles as soon as they came out. And Fallout really captured my imagination just because of the characterization and the world itself. I didn't want to make it derivative of Fallout. I wanted it to be something that touches on that instinct that all of us have, that we want to see, can we survive? My world is different in that it does actually have an overarching villain as opposed to just a world explored. The romance in it is primarily male driven. It is not, oh, she sighed and he looked into her eyes. We don't have that because that doesn't happen usually in the real world.
Well, I mean, I know there's different types of, like, I know there's like the romantics, you know, where it's about the sublime, and I know there's like very old, like medieval romance, which that's another deep cut.
Yeah, no, I love it. I love that part too. But there's a different romance, and that's the romance of the romance of the warrior. The romance of the warrior is the guy is doing a job. He is doing a job he has to do. Things have to die because people... Yeah,
that's very Howard. Yeah, I
love Howard. I read every book he wrote on Conan. I am an aficionado of Conan. I love Conan. And I wanted basically what would happen if Conan was, maybe might fall in love. He probably wouldn't call it love at first. He would call it, I dig you, and I really don't want that dude hitting on you, and I'll probably kill him. And then say it more about it. He would be probably ignoring her most of the time, or else he would be beside himself because she might be trying to get killed. She's probably pretty decent at what she does because Red Sonja is pretty bad. She's rough. She can do stuff, and I've read the Red Sonja series. I read anything that Frank Frazetta has a cover for. I read it. I love Frazetta. It just
he is very good.
Dude, love Frazetta so much. I wanted that man to fall in love, but not in the way that most women would do it. So I can't market Watcher of the Damned as a romance. It does not fit the genre. It does not follow the formula, so I can't do it. But it is a story about a man kind of rough and has a tendency to shoot stuff up, and he's still going to stay that way. My promise to my readers was, because I've having lived long enough, men who are committed to a heroic lifestyle do not abandon that heroic lifestyle just to satisfy a woman's, we're going to go live here and you're not going to. I'm a firefighter. I'm a volunteer firefighter. I'm an EMT. I was an EMT. I've been in some very dangerous situations, and I am married to a fire chief. I don't want him to stop being who he is. I don't want him to go abandon everything to go live with me in a little cabin in the woods. He's busy fighting fires. Dude, it gets really, you get tired of it. They're constantly gone all the time. They're, hauling somebody out of the fire all the time. It's still cool as freak. I'm married to that guy. I don't need to change him. And the reason why men have gotten to where they hate romance is because it's all about, he looked deeply into her eyes. And that's all that exists in the world. There's nothing there but that. And that is why it is deadly to read for so many people. Romance should not be the apex of everything in that story. And so my story is more about a revolution.
Well, that's good.
I have to abandon that idea that it's everything. It's there because you find each other in the middle of war. You find each other in the middle of something else. but the story has to be driven by something more than they looked into each other's eyes. There has to be action and adventure. There should preferably be monsters, which we do have. We have chupacabras. I decided, dude, I put in there. So Okies, you have in the nations, we actually have a character that's coming from the conglomeration, which is actually the Indian nations that have all gathered together in the post-apocalyptic world. And they have Deer Woman, which if you haven't ever read about Deer Woman is freaking awesome. Spooky as heck, but she's great.
You ever read The Only Good Indians? Because like when you say that, it reminds me of the creature in that book, though they call it the Elk Woman in that one.
Yeah, she literally for you. She's like deadly as heck. And so we actually incorporated her into the series. But Ricky Brave Horse Montague, he comes on down, his Monte, and he comes on down, and he's looking for it. And so he's actually probably the only really purely romantic character in the book, because he's a trucker, he's a truck driver, and he hauls overloads over it, and he listens to audiobooks the whole time, and he actually got involved with these audiobooks, and he became very romantic. And so that's how he becomes romantic, because he's an everyday guy. He just wants a little love, but he's not going to give up going over the road trucking for it. He's not going to do that. He's himself. He's who he is. Romance has to be a flavor for the story, but it can't be the whole story. It becomes boring and lifeless. To me, this is me as a writer and me as a reader. My favorite stories of all time are about people fighting for a belief, about being out there challenging evil, trying to overcome whatever darkness has consumed, whether it's personal or worldwide, and that desire to fight back and to be free and to overcome is the primary goal of the story. But to me, that always, when you enter that world and you actually find out who you really are and you become the warrior you were always meant to be, love follows that. Maybe not the way you expect, but love follows somewhere. And so it becomes a part of the story. It's not the whole of the story, but it is a part. And so we're primarily we're sci-fi western, kind of like Star Wars was a space.
Well,
western.
that brings me, because we've been talking for a little bit, and I did want to ask you about your book, so you can like pitch it to.
Oh,
well, I haven't read it yet, so you can pitch it to me as well as anyone else who might watch this. So,
well, thank you.
So what is Watcher of the Damned? I mean, I could read the little thing you gave me, but I'll let you describe it first.
Watcher of the Damned actually was born almost out of whole cloth. I actually had a vision of a man chained at a gate, absolutely hopeless. And it reminded me so much of so many men I know. I don't know if you've ever hung out on 4chan or any place like that, but having been on there a long time, actually myself, as a lurker, and nobody knew who I was, so it was fine. And I talked to guys that feel trapped and hopeless, and this vision of this man chained to a gate, a prisoner who's so much more dangerous than he could be if he just wasn't devoted to trying to save lives, if he just wasn't devoted to caring at all. He can't make himself not care enough to give up what he has. And it's his grandmother, his abuelita. And so he is chained to this gate in a hellhole of a world, which has been brought to its knees by a corporation that wanted to take over the world for the good of the world, of course. And they screwed it up. Screwed it up so bad. But you know what? They've still got their government. They've still got the same system that was there before. And so the system is designed to keep this man chained and down and as little dangerous to himself or others as possible. He's there to do their bidding, but not do anybody else's, because he's not allowed to be the man he is. He's not allowed to be that dangerous creature that every man really is. When you read about the psychology of heroes and warriors, and we talk about cultures of warriors, we don't realize that the men who are in those cultures are just like you and me. They're just like we are in this day and age. But they were raised to believe that they could change things, that they could, if they picked up their sword and went out and challenged it, they could slay the dragon. And we are currently living in a situation that's very similar. And so in Watcher of the Damned, the system has come to hold him down. A catalyst will come into this world, and that catalyst is Rose. In this world, people aren't supposed to reproduce, and they made it possible where nobody was going to ever have kids again. They made it possible. In fact, they messed it up. And so you have a falling population, a crisis that there's no more children. People, the ones that have survived, are living unnaturally long because there's the medicines that they had before and the things that changed for them in the course of the story They're living longer, but there's nobody new coming into the world. There's nothing fresh. There's nothing. It's the same old thing over and over again, and the power that be holding them down still, in spite of all the death and the violence and everything else. This small, dwindling population living in this dark, techless world. Because without people, you can't run things. Without people, how are you going to keep a coal mine going? How are you going to keep a road maintained? Trees grow up, things grow up. The catalyst comes into his life, and he suddenly realizes that he could be free if he wants to be. But there's a cost. And that cost is going to follow him all the way through this series. He has to make decisions whether or not he wants to be a free man, free of his chains, free of his addiction, free of the things that have held him back, to slave away from people who don't care.
Oh, sorry.
Or is he going to go for it? No, is he going to go for it? Is he going to decide he wants to be? And if he does, is he willing to pay the price that it will take? Because it is going to be a very high cost.
So, when you've written the first book at least, so is this going to be a long running series? Do you have a point where you want to go and you know where it's going to end? Like what's going on?
Actually, I have already written the first series. I've written the first 6 books of the series. I wrote it during the middle of the pandemic. It was so compelling to me. I wrote the first 6 books. We have Watcher of the Dam, Transmutation, Texas, 6 Gun Shiva, Babe's Blood,
Hellraiser's... Really like alliteration, I see.
Yes, it's Hellraisers and Heartbreakers, Purgatory and Paradise, which is actually a town that's out there in the middle of nowhere that's actually grown up around an old hunting cabin, and Lone Star Libre, which does actually have a luchador in it and wrestling, because they're going to fight, have some matches and get out there and butt heads trying to establish an army, and they have to figure out how they're going to reach the people with a brand new set of heroes. And so they create these heroes and put them out there and put them on the circuit to fight for liberty, as they say. And so that's the Lone Star Libre. So that series has already been completed. I actually have it, and all 6 books are available for you on Amazon. TTRPG that goes with it, the module that I wrote, so sort of a tester, and it's out there, and we're going to be making more of those. And I've started on the second series, which is there's Watcher the Down Watcher, Watcher the Damned Wanderer, which is after they have started the revolution, how they're going to succeed at doing it. Because one of the things I love about Star Wars, but it's frustrating, is we get the revolution's already started. They've already got Princess Leia working for it and everything else. I wanted to be in on the first part. How do you actually start the revolution? How did they get it going? How did they get the base on the planet out there without the all-seeing eyes of the Empire finding it? We do that in Watcher of the Damned. We actually create the revolution from the ground up. We talk about how you recruit somebody, how you find your fighters, how you break free of that malaise that you're in to become a part of that revolution. And then we move forward to going from how do you create the revolution to how do you actually fight it? How do you do that in a world where you have constant surveillance? How do you do it when you don't have tech, but your enemy does? And we talk about that. We have a case where you have cowboys versus drones, as we find out that the tech world is still out there. You have Texas 1880 versus drones, robots, and the chupacabras and other creatures that have grown up in this world. And it's us versus them, literally going up to toe to toe. And there may be some alliances that can be made. So we go through that in Wanderer. And in the last one, Watcher of the Damned Warlord, he not only is able to, not like spoilers, but he will be able to fight the revolution. The question will become is, can they win? Because you can fight a revolution all day long. You may not succeed. For every revolution that has succeeded, there have been thousands that have failed. Is it worth it if you lose everything? If you lose everything, worth it to try to fight for your own freedom? Is it worth it to try to take down the system? And that is what they are going to try to do in Watcher of the Damned Warlord. They're going to try to finish this. It does have an ending. One of the things I loved, and we talked about it, when we had the Justice League, we actually have an ending. We have a arc that is completed. And I wanted to make sure that I did that in the series. I want this story to have, there are characters that they are going to have an ending. It has a definitive arc. I saw it since the beginning.
So, in other words, we won't be getting like a George R. R. Martin or Scott Lynch type of issue.
No. In fact, I not only did I finish the first series, I actually hurried it out. I'm actually probably going to make a second version of it. Not version, but a second release where we actually correct some errors that were in there. It's just like little spelling and a couple of places where the paragraph skips, things like that. If anybody finds those, let me know. We're going to be putting out a second edition. I hurried to get that out because it was in the middle of the pandemic, and I actually had gotten a bad diagnosis on a disease, and I was like, I may die. I'm going to get my series out. So I published it just as it was, just put it right out there and got it done. And I am now 3 books into the second series. I will have it finished by 2025. The entire series will be done by 2025. If something happens to me and I die, I've already picked my author. So he's already been put into place. I already have a manager to look at the series and the arc and to get it done. There will be no George R.R. Martin magic here where he doesn't finish the series. And I pray to God he does, because he has many dedicated people who loved his series, and he needs to finish it. I am going to finish this series. I'm already into the 3rd book of the 2nd series now. That's book 9. We're book 9, and we may be headed towards book. We now have at least 12 on the roster, and depending on what one character does, it may be 18 books. And so I'm just waiting to see what my character does when I write it in. And if that's the case, we're going to go all the way through to the end. But it will be all done by 2025.
So, is it a spoiler to explain why the apocalypse happened, or?
It is actually explained in the 3rd book. We start off with our character, and I'll give you an example, though. What if the Georgia Guidestones became real? And now a lot of people don't know what the Georgia Guidestones are because it just got destroyed a couple of years ago. But there have been people who, for the good of the world, decided that maybe folks shouldn't live. And it was actually a series of monuments that stated that the world would be taken down to a population of only about 500,000 people, and that they would all eat plants and berries, and everybody would be cool because they weren't going to have kids anymore, because they were just going to sort of live off the land and ain't life grand. Well, I had a vision of what would happen if a corporation screwed it up so badly, if they foobarred it so much that they actually ruined everything, in addition to, in quotes, saving the planet. And so that idea leads to the same thing. Suffice it to say, the apocalypse, the watcher at the beginning does not know why. When you're actually in the middle of something like that, you don't know why. As a first responder, one of the things, we'll actually go on scene and there'll be this giant explosion or something happens. You don't know why yet. I was actually at West right after the explosion. In fact, we went on scene as the cloud was still holding over. We thought it might blow up again when I got there. You don't know why it's happening. You don't know what. You only know there's a big fire. Watcher only knows there's been something really bad happen, all this stuff. It's his job to find out, and throughout the course of this story, that story gets told. How does the apocalypse happen? Why did it take place? Is there somebody responsible for it? How much of it is conspiracy and how much of it is actually fact? There's rumors and rumors abound, and they uncover this mystery as they go through, meeting people along the way who help them put the scene together, and then uncovering that evil which actually allowed this to take place, and they're going to fight it.
All right. This sounds intriguing. I'll definitely check it out. I've been trying to dip my toes more into indie books this year. I actually have, hopefully this upcoming month I got The Legend of Blackjack by A.R. Witham, who I had on this show.
Wow.
I'm hoping to read that soon, because it sounds like something I would like a lot. And A.R. Witham's also a really cool guy.
Yeah. No, you actually know him?
Well, like, not personally. We've had conversation on this show, so.
No, you're a celebrity now. Woo! I want to touch you. You're awesome. No, those stories that come out, those are the ones you want to look for. Whether they're coming through a small publisher or somebody who's trying to make their name, those are the guys to watch. And there's so many great ones out there right now. And it's up to you to find them. It's up to you to tell us what you love and what you think is worthy, and what maybe it's not for you, but it's for somebody else. You know, it could be great. But you're the one that's going to be turning people's eyes to these authors, and you're doing a fantastic job with it, Britton.
Yeah, I mean, that was also one of my things I wanted to do this year. Or actually, I read my friend Philip Chase's book, The Way of Edan, in March,
I keep hearing.
Which,
how do you like?
I quite enjoyed. I thought it was good. If you like classic fantasy, you know, like Lord of the Rings, I mean, I'm sure you'll enjoy it. But yeah, you know, it's been a slow process, but I'm starting to dip in, and yeah, there's some good stuff in there.
Now you'll find love, and what you love is it. I said I always tell, because I've had friends that most of them seem to love the series. There's others that were like, he couldn't get into it. One of my guys hated Fallout, so he hated everything about the series. It's like he had never played Fallout, but he just assumed it was about the series. But he's still my friend. And not only that, but he let me know what he liked about it, what he didn't like about it. It helps me find my audience. when I know what people love or what they don't love, it helps us as authors to find out who we are, where our audience really lies. And that's amazing. That makes such a huge difference for us. You have no idea when authors get together and they talk when they're not with you, and they talk about people that are opening our eyes to who we are as writers. As this is forever. It's on a page. This right here, this can survive an apocalypse. Somebody could find this 1,000 years from now if it's on the right paper and kept in a box. You're getting this out there. You're actually telling people what you love or don't love. You're making this real for us. Without you guys, it's hard for us. When one of you sees something you like or don't like, or whatever it is that you do, but when you talk about what we did, we can't begin to tell you how much we love it. We don't. We try to be cool. You know, we're like, oh, I'm an author and I'm talking to the guy on. You're the superstar here. You actually, when we get off air and we go in and we talk about stuff and we try to tell people about our books, one of the first things we talk about is, I saw so-and-so today and he said he was going to read my book, or I was on his show and I think he might like what I did. And you become an emblem of the people we're trying to reach. You become that becomes our fantasy. If your fantasy is finding that perfect author, that perfect book, our fantasy is finding somebody who loves us. And you're that face. You're the ones we can see. And that makes all the difference for us as authors. So I don't mind fangirl schooling on you, Britton, because I'm not too proud. I don't mind telling you that I'm absolutely enchanted with the work you do, with the work that others have done, whether it's, whether it's you or Royce on Iron Age or James Spray or any of those. It's just, you guys make
John Douglas.
Oh, John, yeah, John.
Also hope to have on the show eventually.
Oh,
we've been trying to click together. It's been tough because he's far busier than I am.
No, dude, he talked about you. He actually talked about you. And so he's like, so Moki dude, I was like, I meant to tell him I was going to be on tonight, so that way I'd see it go up. But you guys are celebrities to us. What we see you do and how we listen, and when you say something, we're like, oh man, he hated my book, I'm going to die, or no, he loved it, it makes me so happy. And I think you guys deserve more credit than you get. And that's not me trying to be just nice. I don't think people tell you enough, because it's really hard being a critic, and I know that's tough.
I appreciate you saying all this, because like you are right. We don't hear that a lot. I mean, I do get comments from like people who I've garnered into my following and people I'm friends with, and they're like, "Oh, this is pretty good," but like I don't really hear it a lot, so it's nice.
Well, I'll tell you a promise. And I had one of my friends say he absolutely hated the book. Other ones have loved it. They've been great to me. And then there was this one, James Craig, just absolutely detested it. I told him before he gave me the thing, because I cried, of course I cried. I'm that person. But I told him, said, I will still be your friend. Why? Because you're putting yourself out there.
I've gathered that you do seem to feel very strongly. I can sense that.
Yeah, I said, well, no, it's who I am. But I'd still love you anyway. Here's the reason why, because you took the time. You actually took the time to look at it. Do you realize what sort of investment it is for a human being to put their eyes to a page and read something this big? You give your life to it. You give time that you could have spent somewhere else. You gave it to us. Readers make the difference. They're everything. And you're a reader who's actually telling other readers what you love or don't love. You have an audience now. So I will still love you. And if you tell me, Becky, I am sorry, I just really can't stand your book. It's too mushy and it takes too long. I'm like, actually, the whole first 3 books are basically a prologue. And then the second 3 books, the action picked up because I had to get my people where they needed to go. So I just wrote. I didn't care. Literally, I think I'm dying at that point. I'm serious. I thought I was going to die. They'd given me I found out that I had a mass on my kidney. I'm like, dude, I could probably be dead by the next 3 months. I released this sucker just like it was. I had written it. Out it goes. So if you find errors or stuff like that, y'all tell me. Because I was like, you know what? I'm getting this done. I'm not going to wait. But so just knowing it's out there, just knowing that somebody loves it. And that there are people who really genuinely love the series. And I'm like, holy cow, I can't believe it. And so you're giving your time to somebody. If you read it or don't, that's great. You gave me this time today. But critics they have a tough road, and they make friends with people, and then they say something, and then folks get mad or they're angry because it can be hard. It's hard to be the critic. I can't do it. I'm not able to do your job. I can't tell people I didn't like something. I was a preschool teacher. I would say something like,
I tried to give books, like, I'm a nicer critic than, like, some other people. I mean,
yeah,
it's,
oh,
I
you are.
don't,
You're not
it's
mean.
also kind of weird because, like, you know, I mean, it's funny, you know, I actually wrote a, I've written a novel. I'm actually, I'm in the midst of messing with it. I just don't know what I want to do with it yet.
Oh yeah, you and I talked, I think, on Matt's stream, I think.
Oh
actually.
yeah, that's right.
Yeah, you and I were talking about, you were writing something, and I got all excited. Oh, that sounds so much fun.
I mean, really, my problem is I don't know what to do with it because, like, I wrote it and I'm like, this story's very niche. I don't know if Orbit's gonna, like, I don't know if you know what Orbit is. Orbit's, it publishes a bunch of fantasy and science fiction novels. I'm like, yeah, I don't know if they take things that are 256 pages, or I don't know how many words it is at the moment.
Well, this is what Iron Age is for. This is actually what it's meant to do.
But then I've had friends who are like, oh no, you're gonna throw your writing away if you know. I'm actually hoping to have a video about trad and self pub and, like, you know, that stuff. I'm hoping to do that soon. I've been trying to get that together for months.
That's what it's for, actually. And here's the thing: if you decide to go trad pub, it's not the end of the world because somebody else goes, oh, you can't do that, or you're one of them, or don't do it because it's just vanity publishing. You're going to do what's necessary for your story to get out to the people that you want to read it. And if it's niche, do you know how many things have been incredibly niche and have been treasured? Absolutely treasured.
Well, that's what attracts me to self-pub, because I feel like I would get an audience much easier if I put it out there and people saw my weird imagination.
I think it sounds fantastic. And personally,
on trad, though, like, I mean, there's also, like, you know, you know, and I don't think there's anything wrong with either approach. It's just, like, I don't know what I'm just personally speaking for myself. I don't know what I'm going to do yet.
Well, you don't know yet, and that's fine, because you're just now starting off in that process. But if you want to talk to somebody, that's what Iron Age is for. We'll point you in the direction you need to go. If you decide you want to look at that part of self-publish, we usually help each other out. And we try to say, hey, you know, if you want a reader, if you want somebody to come out. And yes, it's a mixed bag. We have some people that have S tier writing. We have some people that have F tier writing, but it's still their work. We still try to dignify it. The truth is, cream's going to rise to the top. And you have a great mind you already know what you love and don't love. You already know, you've read extensively, and you have got the ability to articulate yourself very well. So you have this dynamic.
I mean, also there's the fact that I have my YouTube channel. I'm like, okay, I might get some, like, some people are gonna read it. I'm not gonna be like, I mean, I like Mike Molman. I've had him on the show as well.
Yeah.
I won't be like Mike Molman, who just he was telling me. I'm sure he'll be fine with this. He told me about it. He's like, so I put my book out, and I was just waiting for people to read it, and then nothing really happened. I don't think I hope that's not gonna happen. Because I already have a group of I'm getting a group of people together who are, like, you know, like I said, cult following at the moment. I don't know if I'm ever gonna get to that, like, Daniel Green, or I'm not. I mean that would be great if that happened, but I'm not looking for that. But, like, you know, I definitely think I'll be, like, in that, like, cult channel, like, you know, my friend Liam or
Dude,
Raph.
yes. I think that when you look out there and you realize it's like finding a lover, you find your readers, and it's you've been looking for this person all your life, and you find some, and they're like, oh, we dated a couple of times, but I didn't like you, and then they go off, and you're like, you know, and that's me with a critic that doesn't like my book or whatever. And then you find the one. It's the reader that literally picks up your book. And in fact, I have this one. Holy hell, this is good. I usually don't say hell. I'm a preacher's wife, but it was like they read everything.
Wait, so he's a preacher and a fire chief? That's pretty cool.
Yes, we live in a very small community. He's a preacher and a fire chief. Yes.
There must be one tough preacher man.
He is. Actually, he is. He actually goes to biker bars and he preaches there.
And again, you guys are in Texas. There's a lot of tough people out there.
Tough people. But yes, when you find that reader and they say, I love what you wrote and it changed my life. And you find that person and suddenly you forget all the other things. You forget everything. It's just that person, that reader, those readers exist. They're worthy of our love. If you find that it's a huge audience and you have become the next Daniel Green, I want you to have me on your show after that, because I told you this. You are going to find your readers, Britton. They're already there. They're already waiting for you, and you're going to find them, and you're going to have them read. And some of them will love it. Some of them might be, oh, it's okay. But you're going to find the ones who love it. You're going to go, oh my gosh, I've been waiting for you all my life, my readers. In fact, the Watcher is actually a writer. He writes poetry and he draws little pictures. And the reason the romance starts is because she read his work. She actually read something he wrote in a little piece of paper that nobody else cared about. And it opens the door to his heart. That's what it means to be a writer, to be an author who has readers. And you are going to find that reader, and they are going to love you. You're going to love them.
So is the Watcher like so is he human or is he something else entirely? Is he a mutant or something like that?
He is a human who has been mutated by the disease that was unleashed upon the world. And the disease, which wasn't supposed to really be a disease, it was just supposed to kind of, do a little birth control, maybe fix little people so that way people won't go out and have as many kids. It ended up absolutely nuking humanity, and the ones who lived just became
as you do. Gotta love science.
Yeah, and so he's got he's sort of messed him up pretty good, and the ones that are left, because 97% of humanity dies, and almost all women die because testosterone, it turns out, is part of the mix, and it just sort of kills you if you don't do it right. It's kind of like being on steroids constantly. And ask me how I know, but that one it can mess you up pretty good. So just super dosed everybody, and a lot of women die, and there's just not a whole lot of them left. And the ones that are there, they can't reproduce, they can't have children. And so this is about who he is. He's this man who's covered in these sores. His skin has got these thick plaques all over it. Actually, it's based on my own experience with psoriasis, and also friends that I had who had scleroderma, where you get these big, thick plaques, and it's sort of an exaggerated version of that. He's living with this inflamed, itchy skin, and he's lost all of his hair, and he looks like this monster. He's absolutely muscular and huge because it's like having a testosterone bomb hit the world. Wipes out women, and men are just like, raw. They're like the big old dudes and everything. But they still have feelings and emotions.
So they're like the mutants in Fallout. They're just like these, like, just gigantic.
Yeah. Yeah. Basically, they're the mutants in Fallout, except that
so are there regular humans in this setting?
Yes, they actually are. You'll have to meet them. You'll find out as you go through that there are those who didn't get affected. There are people who managed to live through it and still come through intact. But he doesn't know them yet. He doesn't know because the world he's living in has kept him under lock and key, and he's not been allowed to be part of that world yet. And that's part of the reason they're fighting to be free, because it turns out that sometimes people will put you in a place you don't want to be because you no longer fit their idea of human.
That's fair. I mean, you also were nominated for a Prometheus Award.
Yes, actually for 4 of them. I have
four of them. Wow.
I'm not a finalist. Finalists
yeah, I texted you earlier. I'm like, I looked on the Wikipedia. I didn't see your name on there, but yeah, you sent me a website, and you were on there. So
yeah, I'm on. Actually, I show up. There's other places, and on the Wikipedia page, if you go, there actually is a list of nominees. The Prometheus finalists are actually voted on by the Libertarian Futurist Society, which is the Prometheus Award Foundation. It's the third oldest prize in science fiction, and certainly is. I put it up there with the Hugo and the Nebula, although of course everybody's pointing to the Hugo and Nebula, but the Prometheus has been around for a long time, almost 50 years now. And we have this a society, and so what they do, you're nominated. You have to go through a process, and then you have to say, all right, this story is good enough. We love its premise. It has to be something about being a free human. And it shouldn't just be about blowing people away or knocking things over. It has to be about how do you be a free human? How do we make a society where people are treated with liberty and justice for all? And so how do you do that? It's not just rah, go blow it up. It has to be about how you create this world. So it's very exclusive in many ways. So you have to go through the nomination process. You can nominate your book, but it has to go through the process. And then they will say the committee decides whether or not your book is good enough to finish with a nomination. If they decide it's good enough, they go in and they choose your book, and then it is allowed to be on the nominated committee or on the nominated list. After that, the Libertarian Futurist Society votes on the one they want. So the finalists are taken out by the committee. The committee goes through everything out of the nominees and says, okay, we're going to choose these 4 or 5 nominees, usually 4 or 5, and say we love all these books, and they'll tell you about it and they'll put you on the list. But in the end, they're going to choose the finalists, and the society has to vote on which one they want. So that's actually, they do it as an exercise in being a free society. They have to vote, and the votes are counted very diligently. They're very careful about it, and it's. I'm part of that society. I love the Futurist, Libertarian Futurist Society, because it's one of the few places where I know that if I go in and I say, I love this about this book, I read this, I want this book to be the winner of the finalists, that I can do that. So the committee chooses the finalists, but the society votes on which one will actually be the award winner.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because I remember when I was I don't want to say first reading science. Well, I was like 8th grade. Yeah, around the time I was really starting to. I mean, I had read science fiction growing up. I was a big H.G. Wells fan. I loved The Invisible Man.
I love it.
And The Time Machine. I read those when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But like I really seriously started reading like science fiction as a genre, like 7th, 8th, 9th grade, I think 7th grade maybe, and like I remember reading about I was really into like libertarian stuff for a while, and then and then 2016 happened, and I still identify with a lot of those beliefs. You get older. But I digress. I really like, my point is, I really like science fiction because, there's a lot of, I was initially attracted to it because of the philosophical undertones of that genre. There's a lot to explore, I think, with that genre.
Yeah, well, anything that you have in that genre, remember, when we talk about libertarian, that's been the name of the society since 1979. So it's not necessarily what happened in 2016 or anything else. It's about liberty. It's about personal liberty, the rights of the individual, and individualism. Then that's why Aldous Huxley's Brave New World is a finalist. Why Ray Bradbury was a winner for Fahrenheit 451. It's the
fantastic
classic
books.
Yes, absolutely. Ray Bradbury is incredibly influential to me as a writer. He's one of my favorite writers of all time. Him, Jack Vance, H.G. Wells, Robert E. Howard. Those are my go-to. If I can just name them right off the bat, boom, 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 there they are. Isaac Asimov. Those writers, their contributions, Edgar Rice Burroughs with John Carter Mars. These stories are the ones that shaped me, and they are almost all of them have a very strong man versus tyranny style. They're fighting against something. They're fighting against something somewhere. And whether Conan is the ultimate individualist.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
Nobody's going to tell. He is actually the apex. He may not be fighting against one. He's not fighting against communism or something like that, or the obvious. Yeah. But he is definitely fighting against people that would just make him sit down, shut up, and behave.
He wants to live a life of, absolute freedom, but he also wants to live a life where he will be unbound. That's how I think of it, anyway.
Yes. He's allowed to be Conan.
He lives life on his own terms. I remember the line from Queen of the Black Coast. He says, I live, I love, I slay, and am content. I'm like, that's Conan right there. If ever something could sum up what Conan is as a character, what he's about, that quote right there.
Yes, and it's so important that Conan, he grows as a character, but he doesn't change. Let me say this: he's always Conan.
Yeah.
Whether he's Conan just starting out and he's just a blade, or he is actually the king, he is still Conan.
And hates it.
Yeah, he's greater, he's older, he's everything that he needed to be. He's learned from himself, but he doesn't stop being Conan to satisfy somebody. He will never give up being who he is. That is the ultimate freedom, to say, I am this person, I am who I am. You cannot force me into your peg hole because you just want me to be like you or be like you think I should be. It's the greatest act of defiance for you to be yourself.
Yeah, I mean, if I think I could describe. I mean, I think I could get away with describing. I don't know if he was like a strict libertarian, but like Robert E. Howard definitely had some libertarian leanings for sure.
Yes, well, he did, because that at the time that was considered to be that was de rigueur in the Americas, especially. Rugged individualism wasn't just an ideal; it was a way of life. We talk about this. My father was a World War II veteran.
Mm-hmm.
He was born in 1924. His father before him was born in 1881.
Oh my gosh!
My grandfather. My great grandfather fought in the Civil War. I was born to my parents late in life. So actually, I was born. My father was nearly 40. His father before him was nearly 40 when he had him, and his father before him was nearly 40. As a result,
it's like a family tradition.
Yes, I talked to human
like
beings.
That.
When I talked to my father, I talked to the son of a man who lived with a Civil War veteran. I am here to tell you that was a way of life.
Is your father still with us?
No, he passed away actually in 1998.
Oh,
and I know
man, he'd be 100 this year if he were still kicking.
I know, it's so exciting. I was like, dude, it's gonna be my dad's centennial. I'm here to tell you these men really existed. These men and women who thought they could be free, that actually thought that they could do what they wanted to do. I was raised by them. They existed.
I definitely feel that Howard was that way. Again, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, you're right. Howard is an extraordinary figure. A lot of people focus on his death. They focus on, and then a lot of people who don't like Howard will talk about, oh, he was just compensating. No, he was a boxer. He was attempting to be everything that he thought he should be. And he was still a writer, and he still became depressed and mourned his mother, because that's who he was as a human being. Anyone who denigrates a man who is fully a warrior and also can have his heart broken has never met real people. We're not cardboard cutouts, and neither was Conan. When we read these stories, when we hear of these voices from ages past, Robert E. Howard was a real human being who was trying to live that life. Conan is a representation of that, but Robert E. Howard actually lived part of it. There is much to admire in this, the idea that we can be ourselves fully, that we do not have to conform ourselves to the present world, but we can be greater than what we actually are just by being ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite fascinating, I think, considering. I also really like Solomon Kane, though.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to be honest, if I could be frank, I think Conan is actually like. It's funny. I like Solomon Kane a lot because I'm really interested. Yeah. For some reason, I just love Puritans. I
know, it's cool.
But I think like Conan's like the better written stuff. Like it's like, I think there's a much more established tone. I think the characterization's strong. I think the voice is a lot stronger in that. And there's some great Solomon Kane stories for sure, like Red Nails and Right Hand of Doom, of course.
Well, part of it, when we're looking at these things too, he was writing them for Pulp Fiction a lot of times.
Sure,
so you have these short stories, and they're all melded together, and so it's a different tone sometimes for different magazines or for different reading styles. And so they would change a little bit with each one. Conan, though, seems to have this purity about him. And I'm not just trying to fangirl on him, because I love the character. He is who he is. I've met these guys. There actually are people like this.
I haven't read like Cole yet, or what's some of his other ones? Brock Manmorn or Brock Monmorn? I can't remember.
Yeah, he had a detective series. He had a couple of other ones. His characters usually are, in quotes, manly men. They will be a facet of Robert E. Howard. They are a facet of his own personality. And Conan is probably the one that was the easiest for him to put into words, because it is the purity of the warrior king.
Mm.
And Conan does read occasionally. He does.
No, he hates being a king.
Yes, he hates it. That was the most wonderful thing.
The literal first Conan story is about him hating the fact that he's actually a king. He can't just go out and fight anymore.
Yes, he says, "I got everything I wanted. Why are you sad, my liege?" One of the women says, "Why are you sad?" Because I got everything I wanted. There's nothing to strive for. That's the whole point. Everything in this life, things that are worth fighting for are worth fighting for because they're wonderful. And when we don't have something worth fighting for, we feel empty. So sometimes we make up stuff just to pretend like, oh, I've got something we're fighting. In reality, the whole world is filled with things worth fighting for. We just have to find them and fight for them. That's it.
Yeah, I mean it's kind of interesting. I think Howard compared to like it's funny considering that like I always think of unless you're a fantasy fan, Howard is more like a cult figure. Well, like Lovecraft
Yeah.
has become like really famous
Oh yeah.
because they knew each other, they corresponded, they were friendly.
Oh yeah. That's so crazy. I would love to see it. I'd love to have seen like I think there was a movie actually about Howard and Lovecraft. Like that'd be the ultimate buddy movie.
I don't
Like
know
one's really
about that. I do know there was a movie called The Whole Wide World, which was about Howard and like a romantic relationship he was in.
yeah.
I haven't seen it, but I do like Vincent D'Onofrio, so maybe I'll try it out at some point.
I'll have to look at it then too. We'll see if we like it or not.
I have a friend who's a big Robert E. Howard nut. He loves that movie. So
Oh, does it really? So it's true to that. That's the main thing. Is it true to what we know about Howard? And with that, because I think that one of the hardest things for me, and I know that it becomes fashionable, for lack of a better word, to hate on certain authors or to be mad. I can't really be mad at George R. R. Martin, for instance. I know, first of all, he wrote some incredible hits. Whatever happened that he hasn't finished the series, I can pray that he does. But it becomes fashionable to hate on some authors. And Stephen King had written about, and I don't think he was trying to be mean about Howard, but he had written some things about Howard where it was, puerile and everybody, making fun of people who read Howard.
that's funny because on my I have the Del Rey versions of
Yeah.
the Conan stories, which I often recommend to people because that's Howard. That's his work. It's untouched by other editors. It's not like nothing like that. It's the stories as he wrote them. There's actually a blurb by Stephen King where he's like his I'm paraphrasing here, but basically he's like his writing could be so ferocious you could see sparks.
Yes, and that was actually where he moves into it, and that's what people miss on King, is that he says, well, yes, puerile. He doesn't really like the readers of Howard because he feels like that he doesn't like him because he feels like they're attempting to find masculinity. But he says it's Howard's writing, and so that's it. And Stephen King says this, and this is why it's exactly what you said. It's like the sparks fly from the edge of the sword. You can feel it in the words, the cadence itself. Every time the sword hits, you feel it through the words. And that is the majesty of an author finding their voice and the readers loving it. And when you get that, nothing, you know what, Howard could have been huge like Tolkien or like anyone else before the movies, because after the movies, he did become big. But before then, but what would have happened to the audience that was looking for Howard, that was looking for that voice? It's you and me. It's the ones who fell in love with Howard. It might not be the whole wide world, but we're the ones. It was made for us. I love it. I love the fact. So maybe somebody thinks I'm a puerile reader because I love Howard, or because I love masculine stories about men fighting and drinking and loving their way to victory. Because I tried to write one, and I know I wrote R.H. as a Snow is because I thought Rebecca Snow sounded like a romance writer, and I didn't want people to, it does sound like a romance writer.
No, I mean that's
it was so it was masculine enough that somebody yeeted the book literally going, well, this is written by a dude and it's all about dudes. And I was like, no, it actually has a female lead. It has a female lead. It has a female villain.
Bro, read Queen of the Black Coast.
Oh yeah. Oh,
it does drag a little bit, but man, it's a great story.
No, it is. That is that swashbuckling type of blood in your veins and wind in your hair adventure that makes you want to be alive in that story. And I know there are readers that love the introspective looking at paint dry while you think about your love far away. But I can't do that. I can't do it. And
I mean, Conan does some brooding from time to time.
He does. Well, the Watcher is more broody than Conan. I will say he's not. You don't just jump in and suddenly he's going from adventure to adventure. But there's a build up for it and everything like that. And because there is a romantic element involved, he's not just going and hacking stuff up. He's got this chick tagging along. He's trying to make sure she stays alive, she frankly is trying to get away because she has a mission of her own. And so they have to interact. And so I actually cut the first book in half. I actually cut it. So it's actually 2 books. It was the first, Transmutation Texas was a monster book. And I like to keep my books under 150 if I can. I think 150,000 words.
Oh, I'm like, I often think in page count. Oh.
Yeah, I do. Well, page count for me, because I'm losing my eyesight, I insist on my font being 12 point, which means it's bigger. So it has like a ton of pages, but it's actually a lot easier to read because it's a bigger font, so I can read it. So it's like a medium-sized font. But so I actually cut Watcher of the Dam, the first 2 books, the first book in half. So it actually ends sort of on a cliffhanger thing. And a lot of people are like, was this it? This is the ending? They get mad. And I'm like, no, dude, go read the second book. Read the second book. It's the best part. So it's like, but I know so many people, if they see a gigantic book, they get discouraged. And they won't pick it up. So I was like, I have a choice to make. I can either cut this book in half and it will be a better book for somebody. And so far, I say most of the people who've read it loved it at that pace. And then it picks up in the second part of it because that's where the adventure actually starts. You're getting on the road.
I've heard a lot of critiques of people who said this book should have been a little longer. So, I mean...
I say literally it rolls into the second book. And, of course, I cut it in half because at that point I'm like, I talked to my editor and they're like, this is, really super, super long. And so we made that decision at that point to go ahead and do it. And so in reality, the series goes in books of 3. It's the first 3, the second 3, and then the third 3, which is the road series, and then the fourth section of 3, which is going to be finding the destination and fighting war. And so we sort of have it in 3s, and so I did it that way. And so I said, so far, yeah, they felt like it should be longer. I'm like, okay, go buy the second book. There it is. You know what's really great, though? If somebody says, I wish your book had been a little longer, is way better than saying, I wish it wasn't as long. Because the one where people are like,
yeah, no, that's the critique I often hear is like, you could have cut. I've even made that. Like, I've seen some films like the Snyder Justice League film. I'm like, this film could have easily been a 2-hour film and it would have worked just fine. You don't need any of this extra stuff. Then again, I don't want to get into the DCU or DC, whatever the hell they're calling it now, because that's just a tale of debacles, and yeah, I don't want to go there.
I know, is it? Well, I have a problem, and it is that I actually really, really love Tolkien, and I love his description of the Ents, and so I read the Silmarillion when I was in 8th grade.
Oh, I still haven't read it.
Dude, I loved it. And so there's a warning to people. If you really, really hate Tolkien talking about the Ents, you're not going to like Watcher of the Dam. I love talking about how things are. Look, I love describing a world. I like to take time to let people have that. I do not have a party like at the beginning of The Hobbit. My husband actually yeeted The Hobbit because he hated the fact that, and the first book of Lord of the Rings, he refused to read it because he got like 50 pages and he's like, they're still at the same party. And then he threw the book. I was like, no, for real, just keep reading. No, I'm tired. He would skip ahead to where people were fighting. He loves Aragorn. He just skipped ahead.
So he would be more of a Howard guy, not a Tolkien guy.
Yeah, he's an absolute Howard dude. And so I'm sort of somewhere in the middle because I love how Tolkien describes things. I like the parties and the talking and people speaking to each other. And I'm really not even upset about Tom Bombadil. I'm kind of cool with him. So some people won't like that part of the project.
Maybe you could show them the movies. They're more streamlined.
Oh yeah, well that's true. And he loved the movies, and it's one of my favorite trilogies of all time. Right up there with Star Wars. Actually, the trilogy is Lord of the Rings. It's just fantastic. It's just impossible to beat it. And the thing about Tolkien that it makes more sense to me now, as a person who's losing my eyesight, and so I eventually I could go blind from this, and I may not be able to see more. In the book, I'm describing things I've seen. The way that grass waves on the prairie, it actually looks like an ocean. And there's this pink grass called pink millie grass. And I've written the scene where the Watcher and Rose are riding across it, and there's terrors and dangers ahead, and there are animals in the wilderness, and there are monsters trailing them, and there is a drone somewhere off in the distance that's seeking their digital signature. But all he can see is this ocean of grass and the beauty of it. And the fact that the world is so beautiful and horrible at the same time. I wanted to be able to visit that world again. I wanted to be able to go back to that meadow and see the pecan tree standing in the middle with a herd of horses thundering towards them, because I wanted to be able to see it again. When I hear those words being read, I'll be able to see it in my mind. I'll be able to see it just like it's a movie. I wanted to write it that way so I could see it again someday when I can no longer see and my eyes no longer work and I can't draw, or maybe I won't be able to type the way I did, but I can hear, and I'll be able to hear what the prairie looks like beneath the moon. I'll be able to hear it. Because that's the power of language.
Oh yes, very much so. I mean, I've been wanting to reread some like old fantasy that I enjoy, like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. I don't know when I'm gonna do it, but I'd like to do it sometime soon.
Jack Vance. I love Jack Vance, and if you like Howard, you'll probably love Jack Vance. And if you get a chance, read him. Uh, um, his A Dying Earth books, absolutely fantastic. They're the basis for D&D, for the magic systems that are there, and for a lot of the fantasy works that you are reading. Jack Vance is the magic system that occurs with it, and it's an interesting blend of science fiction and fantasy. I think you would love Vance. If you like Howard and you like Wells, you will probably love Jack Vance. And he is.
I've heard of Jack Vance for a very long time. I've heard of like his Dying Earth. I heard he did one called
Dying Earth is.
Dying Earth
is my jam.
It sounds like it looks like when you look at it, it kind of sounds like lioness, like a female lion,
Absolutely.
but it's yes. like a standard. I don't want to say standard, but it's like more. It's more traditional fantasy. That's a good.
It is. At the time, it was different. At the time, it became standard because it was that good.
I've heard his Dying Earth is the one everyone's like, oh my god, you got to read it.
Please read it. Please read it. Dying Earth is a huge influence for me. I love it. And if you hate it, then I'll know you hate my book, and I'll be like, I don't care anymore. Now, although people will say that my prose, it's really weird if you put your like stuff in. People will tell you like there's apps where you can put it in. And it'll say, okay, this is kind of like this author. This is kind of like what is it consistent? It's more about is it consistent in the tone. And so I fed it into one of these things. It says H.G. Wells. It comes out every time right on top, and I'm like, yes. But then I was really, really hoping for Jack Vance. I didn't get that. At least I didn't get like I don't know. Okay, this is not me being mean, but F. Scott Fitzgerald. I know he's a great guy. I can't. I'm so bored when I read those. I don't know what to do about myself. I'm not that.
Great Gatsby is one of my favorite books.
No, I'm sorry. Great Gatsby, it's okay, but now the dialogue. I love the dialogue. I love that part, but I wanted somebody to shoot something so bad. I mean, just blow something.
Oh, okay, fine. All right. There isn't a lot of there is some shooting at the end, but there's not a lot of
yes,
shooting.
Yes, there is. But yeah, so you're right about this. So the Great Gatsby, the reason it is so beautiful and so poignant is because F. Scott Fitzgerald is speaking from experience when he speaks of the emotion that he feels. Because you know, if you've read about F. Scott Fitzgerald's life and the tragedy of his love life and the things that haunted him to die, those emotions become so raw, and he says it in such a way that it feels timeless. When I read F. Scott Fitzgerald, I can't tell you if I'm reading somebody from the 1800s or from just yesterday. The emotion is so brutal, and his dialogue is so perfect. It flows. I can tell Daisy, when Daisy talks, I can tell who she is right away. You wouldn't have to put Daisy said on there. Her dialogue is so different. You can tell immediately who each character is. There's no question about it. His voice, the way he speaks, the narrative voice of the entire thing is so emotionally on point. And it is born out of pure, brutal heartache. It is his voice. And that is the actual key to his success.
Well, I mean, that's what a good author should do, right? I mean, you know.
Yeah, it is.
I find the best authors, at least for me, are the ones that are most singular. Where when you put the book down, you go like, that guy is the only person who could have written that book.
Well, and you hear their voice from that point forward. I cannot read Tolkien without hearing Tolkien. His voice permeates everything. When you read Tolkien and then you go back and listen to his actual dissertations on the book, he's still speaking as if he is writing. It is him. I'm hearing his voice. The same thing with Fitzgerald or with Howard. I'm hearing Howard have a fist fight. I'm literally hearing his westerns are absolutely hysterical. I love his westerns.
I've yet to read his but I've heard like they were like his most popular before he died.
They were absolutely. He was known for his westerns, the vernacular that he uses, the language. It is 90% of it is his dialogue. His dialogue is just on point. But so when I read Howard, I'm reading about a fist falling broad kind of guy. When I read F. Scott Fitzgerald, I read a broken heart. I read a person that is caught in the midst of wealth and fame, but there's an empty space, a hole there that can't be filled. When I read H.G. Wells, I read this mind of a scientist exploding with ideas and finding on the other side of a void, there's a people there that he never knew. I'm reading their thoughts in their voice, and that is the greatness of great literature. And of course, we all have our preferences. I have a tendency to be a little bit more action oriented, a little bit more romance oriented in that respect. But
well, I mean, The Great Gatsby is technically a doomed romance.
It is. That's why I didn't like it. That was the reason I didn't like it, because I wanted it to be okay, and it wasn't. that is actually it. I wanted him to do something. I think that was what
you wanted him to make an epic speech, slay Tom Buchanan, and get with Daisy.
Just go ahead and plug. You know what? Plug him. Daisy deserves better. It's you. Go get that guy. And I know that's probably the wrong attitude to have. So
I know you're being facetious. I think
I really am. I know you shouldn't have done. No, you don't want to kill him, but I'm just. You know what I'm saying?
Now, if you read the book, you're probably like, God, this guy's a douche. No, I mean Tom Buchanan. He's.
Oh yeah,
he's not a nice guy.
No, he's not. And Daisy deserves better. My chicken deserves better. That's why I was mad about it. But that was the thing. He made me believe they were real. I cared about what happened to them, and that's why it made me upset. I wanted somebody to do something. And I think that actually that's probably a bigger kudo than I ever thought I would ever give that book, because that actually was because I cared. I that ended the way it did.
Like I'm a big Ray Bradbury fan, and you read his books and you're like, yeah, he's the only person who could have written like that.
Which one's your favorite Ray Bradbury book?
It's funny. I often it's a tie between the Martian Chronicles and Something Wicked This Way Comes.
Dude, no, Something Wicked This Way. I love the Martian Chronicles. Love them. Absolutely.
Oh no, Something Wicked This Way Comes. That's a magical book.
That is, but it is Something Wicked This Way Comes that it pierces the veil between fantasy and horror in such a way, and it's not the horror of blood spattered everywhere. It's the horror of what actually could happen when our main protagonist.
Also, I'm a big fan of Mark Twain's Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn. Those were childhood favorites of mine. Because I was a weird kid. I grew up reading those illustrated classic. Yeah. And it also really showed me that real life can be just as adventurous. I mean, I love fantasy and science fiction and horror and all that. I still love speculative fiction, but those books remind me that, or something like Oliver Twist reminds me that real life can be just as adventurous and just as vigorous as anything in a fantasy novel.
Well, and once again, it's the voice of the author, and I love.
And I think Bradbury really captured that. It's basically like if Tom Sawyer was a fantasy. That's why I really like that.
Tom Sawyer was a fantasy in it, but it also there's that. Now I take it. Mark Twain, when he writes a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's Court, he actually writes a science fiction book, basically.
I still need to read that. I feel so.
You need to read it. It is a political commentary as well, but Twain is that master of taking it between the darkness of reality to the lightness that just on the other side of that same situation, and at that picaresque feel of going down the river. I actually wanted that for Watcher the Damned. I love that type of story, and the only time I've actually had readers, they were like, well, they're going from one point to the other. That's the story. They're moving down through this.
Yeah, I've noticed in a lot of the stuff I've written, I'm like, man, I really like the picaresque style, because a lot of it is just stuff, they get into. I don't know why, I like those weird Odyssey narratives where.
Because you're traveling with the characters. You're on the raft with Tom Sawyer. You're on
And
the raft
Huckleberry Finn.
with Huckleberry Finn. You're literally floating down the river. When I hear Huck talk, and he's going down the river, and he's on this adventure, and it's dangerous and it's terrible, and Jim is his only friend. I'm with them. It's like being there.
Don't you feel alive? Yeah, exactly.
I know, it's so much fun. That's the majesty of it. I love the fact that I'm a 61-year-old woman who is right now, I mean, because I've got a medical condition, I stay in my little room most of the time. That's why I'm in the bed. I have my little feet up so I don't get in trouble with my heart or whatever. I can read Huckleberry Finn. I'm on the river. I'm floating down. I read Tolkien, and I'm riding on the shoulders of an ant. I read H.G. Wells, and I just landed in a world I don't know where I am, and the time machine just kicked me out with some 4 feet tall people that are actually even shorter than I am, which is really exciting because I'm only 4'11". And so I literally
You're about my mom's height.
Dude, yeah, you know the little women rule. You know that. That's yeah, we can be rough, but we rule with the iron handed. It's filled with love, 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 love. So yeah, I think that ability to go down the river with Huck, or to go on the journey with H.G. Wells, and that picaresque feel of just being there for the adventure. It's more than just the story plot line itself. It's being there. It's being able to be a part of that world. It's just amazing.
You know, that's a really beautiful way to put it, because sometimes it's hard for me to explain why I like books like Huckleberry Finn, or if you really want to go into the 180 of like really dark, like Blood Meridian. It's not really.
Oh, dude, I've got to read Blood Meridian. I'm trying to prepare myself. I've read.
I'll put it this way: it is not a scrappy adventure.
No, it's not.
It is but it is very much or if you want to read something that's relatively lighter than that to start out with, from Cormac McCarthy, All the Pretty Horses is also.
Oh, dude, that's what I read, but then the prison. I'm not going to say what happened there, but the prison scene was hard on me because I'm not usually able to read stuff like that, and it was just. But his language is so extraordinary. He makes horrible things sound beautiful because he'll be describing the way the sunlight touches the mountains while somebody's beating you up in prison or whatever. It's like, it's just, he has that ability to transcend the actual story to make it extraordinary.
Or Heart of Darkness is a similar. I really read that book. It's not very actiony, so I don't know if you've ever read it, but
I read Heart of Darkness. I have read. I read To Hell and Back, which is Audie Murphy. I read a lot of war stories. Jeremiah Denton's what was it? Jeremiah Denton's memoir of being in a Vietnamese prison, things like that. They're pretty brutal. Not really action. It's just that experience. But I think it's the same thing you're talking about with Cormac McCarthy. He has such an evocative way of explaining things. It's like you are there with them. Mm-hmm. When I read All the Pretty Horses, it never once broke for me. The scene never broke. I was always there. Nothing took me out of that scene. I was, he has such an extraordinary style. I can't even hope that I would ever write like Cormac. But he takes me along on that journey. It's kind of like with Cormac McCarthy, you're over this main character's shoulder. You're watching from here. You hear everything and see everything that character sees.
But like, what's interesting, like with someone like McCarthy, because I've heard people go like, his characters are weak. It's like, but like that's not why you read them. You read them because you want an experience. It's like, oh no, man, it's like reading The Wasteland from T.S. Eliot. You don't read that because you want it's like reading old poetry. You don't read old poetry because of stuff that we freak out about, like pacing or character. I mean, there are characters in poetry. Characterization is a big thing for me, so I'm not dissing on that. But reading McCarthy is like reading old poetry. You don't read it like other books. You feel it,
Actually, okay, that is the perfect description of that is prose. It is Cormac McCarthy's prose that takes us into the world he's in. And when you talked about T.S. Eliot, you can hear "We Are the Hollow Men," that voice, his language is so evocative that you literally feel the despair seeping out T.S. Eliot is remarkable that he is that voice of the poet from the mid 50s of the 1900s. Literally, that from 1950 on, T.S. Eliot becomes that voice of the man who feels empty, and that that description. Now, you don't read it because you want to be part of that world, but you read it because you become part of that world.
Well, and yeah, exactly. It's kind of like that with like McCarthy or someone like oh God, who else could I bring up? I could say Bradbury is similar in that way. He's just I think he's not as bleak as McCarthy or T.S. Eliot.
No, he's not.
I
would say probably not.
But again, it's kind of like reading old like you don't, or reading, or if I could compare any poetry, it's like reading great romantic poetry. Not like romance, but like romantic, like Shelley or Byron. You read it to feel it. You don't. It's not just the experience. It's not just like, oh, these have like good characters. And again, I like characterization a lot. Like that's a big draw for me. So I'm not dissing on that, but I think there's a certain magic of books that have been lost. I think, or a magic of reading. Sorry, I keep interrupting you. What are you saying?
No. You're on point. I love Ozymandias for a reason, because it is the voice of the desert. It is the voice of the abandoned civilization that, all shall look, worship me in despair, and there's nothing there, and that hollowness there. Or when you read Williams Ernest Henley, with "Out of the night that covers me, black as the pit from pole to pole, I think whatever gods may be, for my unconquerable soul." Invictus. Grab these people because it's the language itself. The character is you. When you read those poems, when you read these books, you become part of the story. You become the poem. You become this person.
It's what the or at least how I think of it, the romantics would call it the sublime.
Yeah.
I don't know what I would call it. I mean, I don't know.
I think you're on point with it. I think it's that description that you're trying to make of that. But I'm hearing this theme with you over and over again.
Or, even with Howard does that when like he's really on like I mean
he's on fire.
What?
When he's on fire, he does. He absolutely gets that moment.
I mean, even then he wrote poetry too. I mean, like Sorry, my OBS was saying something.
No,
but continue what you were saying.
We're pulling up a Howard poem. I was excited for a minute. I was getting Now, if you want to read poetry, you go for it. That's what I'm hearing. Here's what you are doing. As you're taking your books to your readers and to your people that are viewing it, you are bringing the language to them. You're taking them inside the book, and this is something that's unique to you, pretty much. Others, everybody has their specialization. With Matt, he's digging into the author's mind, and he sort of takes out these little nuggets from Bearded Darkness. I have him next week. John A. Douglas, he talks about the book, and here's what I read, and I love this beautiful thing. With you are actually taking your viewers inside the book, and you take them inside the language, and it is part of who you are as a reader. You grew up reading these classics. You grew up reading classic poetry. And you're saying names that I haven't heard somebody else say in a long time. And we were required to read poetry in my family. We had to read the Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam.
Edgar Allan Poe. I mean, I don't. Yes. I'll admit, I like The Raven. I'm not as into his poetry as I am to his short stories. And like his short stories, But same thing. You feel it. It's not like Again, it's weird. It's hard to explain.
It is. It's the marriage of language and.
It's like when someone describes what I mean. You believe in God, but you believe in God, and I've met or I've known a lot of religious people because I grew up religious, and they describe. It's kind of like describing when you when people say they feel God's presence. It's kind of like that, at least how I would depict it.
Yes.
Though I mean, I don't. That's not to say I think reading is a quasi-religious experience, but
it's okay to say that, because here's the thing. So yes, when I say
that might sound a bit grandiose, is what I'm getting at.
But you're saying that logos, the words that are an image of somebody's mind. I can look at a picture on a page. A letter is a picture of a sound. A picture of a sound makes a word. I am literally able to hear the words of Plato, thousands of years dead. In my mind, it is his spirit that suddenly takes a hold of this word. And when you have an author that strings together these words in such a way, it creates their mind for you. You are having a conversation with a man who may have been dead for thousands of years. You still have this. It is a moment, we maybe not religious, but it's spiritual. You are touching another person's mind, their thoughts. It's incredible to
like
think
it's like an emotional experience, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at, or
yeah,
or like you say, a spiritual experience.
Yeah, yeah. It literally lights inside of us the experience of another human being. Maybe it's written as a story, maybe it's written through the eyes of a different character, but that emotion that flows from author to the page back to a reader who may be reading long after that person is dead, it is a transcendental experience to feel that emotion, that just soaring off the page because of letters making pictures of sounds. And
well, I guess the point I'm making is when I read, I'm often chasing that feeling.
No, I agree. I think it sounds great. And that's when you find it, then you'll let your readers know that is you are reveling in the experience of reading. The act, whether it's a terrible, a terrible ending, and it's everybody's upset, like the Elric of Melvin.
I mean, Michael Moorcock. A lot of people a lot of people know him because of Epic Pooh, and he doesn't like Tolkien, whatever. He is carrying on the tradition of like Robert E. Howard and Fritz Leiber. Like, he is very much a pulp writer, or he was before he really went into like postmodernism.
Here's the thing about Michael Moorcock. When you have the ability to make a reader literally throw the book across the room because they are so angry because they were hoping for something different for your character, that emotion that's involved, that they care that much. I saw a man throw the book because he was like, I can't believe it ended this way, because he had been thinking, certainly somebody's got to pull this out. They got to do this. He cared so much. Michael Moorcock created a character that made a man so mad that I said they throw it. And he read the whole series. I mean, he read everything from start to finish, because that.
It gets out there.
Yeah. No, it's a great series. And it explores the darkness of power and of magic.
Actually, my next book in my fantasy series I'm doing is actually my take on Elric. So I'm really excited for that.
No, so tell me, have you read the whole series?
When I was in late high school, I read the whole thing, and it's been a long time now, so I might forget details.
No. Yeah. So I'm not giving you a spoiler there when I say something. So, in the series, and like I said, that emotional investment, hoping that maybe something will happen different. And I've had so many people that when they have that visceral response, this is an addiction to power, an addiction to an item that can suck the life out of you, literally. And his description and his ability to make it real.
He's also another writer I think is a lot better than people give credit for. I mean, a lot of people remember like Epic Pooh, and but they think like, oh, he just wrote like there's some good stuff. I think Elric. I mean, I do like Corum, but I kind of think of Corum as like Diet Elric. It's not as good. It's not as weird and out there as Elric is.
Yeah, and it lacks that. Elric is a tragedy. It is a tragedy. It's meant to be that way. There's not a happy ending for Elric. It can't be. The sword is too powerful, and the sword is the character, actually. And Elric is fighting for his own life with this character, the sword. And so a lot of people don't realize that you're rooting for Elric because we see our own humanity in him. We see how he's torn away by this object that has a life of its own. And anybody who's ever struggled with that, who's ever loved somebody who's been addicted or been an alcoholic, you feel that when you read it. It becomes so emotional for me. And I'm not saying that Elric was written that way, but I recognized that when I read it. I was like, it's just like watching somebody you love being drawn into the bottle and you can't get them out. And I think that's why Moorcock's ability to capture the despair is perfect where it is. It would be ruined in a, oh, well, here's a happy ending, let it happen.
Well, yeah, it's funny you mention that. I made a video about tragic endings the other day. Or why I think that people find greater catharsis in tragic endings than they do in happy endings. And there's a lot of great movies or great stuff with happy endings, like, Preacher, the comic book, or Star Wars, relatively. Darth Vader dying's kind of sad, but happy ending nonetheless. But I talked with some friends, and and they seem to think that they really made me think about how tragic endings tend to get like a bigger reaction out, like gets a more lasting reaction out of people than like a happier ending. Now now some of them are of the opinion that like tragic endings are better than happy endings, and I was kind of a part of that video was me going like, I don't agree with all that, but I do agree with the fact that for some reason out there, people really get more emotional catharsis out of. I mean that Aristotle said it himself. Tragedy should breed catharsis.
We need catharsis, and we our lives. Tragedy can have elements of joy in it. The greatest endings are the ones where the tragedy happens and there's still that joy, the hope, that something good has come out of it. There is a payoff of that takes it beyond the realm of just, oh, it was a bad ending and they did terrible choices. It makes it worth it. It's worth it. That's the catharsis we're looking for, because each of us, in reality, we're all living a tragedy at some point. We will die.
One of my conclusions in that video was I feel a good ending should be appropriate to the story that's being told. And you just said that, so that's what made me think of that. Or you brought that up. That made me think of that video.
Yeah, it was true, and but we're all living a tragedy. I said we will die. People we love will die. Their lives will be taken from us, and we may not get everything we wanted. Knowing that a tragedy occurs, that other people have been through it, that we can cry about it on screen, that we can watch. If you've ever read Where the Red Fern Grows, which is brutal. Oh,
I read that in school.
Dude, oh my gosh. Our teacher read it to us out loud in 4th grade. There was kids just sobbing in the back. It was great. It was awesome. And that story, because it's not just, oh, and the dog died. It's the dog died and he loved her. He loved her. Love has a cost. There will always be some tragedy involved with it, because when you love something enough, you hate to let it go, and we all have to let go at some point. That catharsis and finding it in that right moment, where the world is in tears, but there's still that light in the darkness. That is the absolute apex of tragedy.
I got some interesting comments on that video. I even got a comment from a friend of mine who sometimes comments on my videos. We go back and forth from time to time, and like it was really like heavy. I won't say dark, but it was very heavy. I was like, wow, I was not expecting that in the comments.
No,
maybe I'll give you that video. You can watch it and tell
I would love you to do that, because one of the things is that you're discovering your voice as a critic. When you go in and you say something like this, people are looking for interaction, to be able to say what it is that actually has happened in their own lives. When we interact with literature, with movies, with music, we are seeking that catharsis. Just like you said, we're seeking that emotion. If I hear a romantic song, I want to hear that. I want to feel.
Well, that's funny you bring that up. It's the same thing with music. It's kind of hard to, it's funny. Going back to what I look for when I'm reading, it's like, you listen to a great song, you feel it. It's really hard to go like, oh, well, the melody sounded nice. Like, that just sounds like, it's an emotional experience. Like, that's the problem between like logic and emotion, because like it's hard to. That's why they're different. It's really hard to logically explain an emotion.
You can't. It's a chemical that releases But why does it happen? There's a mystery there that transcends just common physicality. It's not just that I feel pain here. There's something that happened 1,000 years ago, and I read about it, and it brings pain to my heart. Or there's the music is there. Well, just to describe it, it's really hard. I don't know if you've ever heard La Vie en Rose by Edith Piaf.
I have, yeah.
When she sings it, there's a version I'll have, and I'll send it to you, where she is singing it after the war. The audience is filled with men and women, but mostly women. It's in France. And as the camera pans, this is
I've
live.
noticed that women are more romantic than men. That's fine. But that's not sexist, is it?
It's not. It's not, and that's the reason why I don't build Watch with Dams of Romance, because I know that a lot of my male readers may not. They just don't want to be bombarded by that stuff. They don't want it to be all about that, and so it's part of the story. I said it's not the story, but when the camera pans to the audience, and she is singing, you realize these women are remembering somebody who died in a war. They're sitting alone here, and their eyes are just glistening. And Edith Piaf is singing this song, just pouring it out of her. And it becomes the apex of what it means to feel the pain of beauty that existed and no longer is there, but you can remember. And it's just that gripping feeling. I'll send you this link, because if you know that song, you will understand why this is so powerful. These are the real emotions of people being turned into music and being poured out into us. 7 years later, I'm feeling what a woman in France felt. And the books and the music.
That's what timeless art should do.
Yes. It creates a bond between ages that cannot be broken just by time.
Sorry, I got a text message from a friend of mine.
No, you're fine.
It's funny. It's a similar. I don't know. I hope you've read William Blake, but it's a similar kind of thing with that as well.
Yes, absolutely. I am the tiger burning bright in the darkness. So, and of course, Albion, one of my favorite English songs, actually. I believe it's Albion, where.
I did enjoy singing Jerusalem when I was in.
Yes, that was his Jerusalem. Actually, it actually is Jerusalem.
Even though it's not based on his poem Jerusalem, it's actually based on Milton. But I digress.
Yes, it's based on Milton's vision of that and of England as he saw it, and it's shoot the bow and that the golden bow. That's this arc of light and enlightenment. And that it reaches out and it overarches all of the tragedy, the darkness, and the industrial grime and everything else, and elevates the listener to this place. That music, combined with Blake's imagery in his poem, is absolute greatness.
Indeed, exactly. It's again another uniquely him. But this has been great.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that.
But I do. We've been going for a while, and I do have to. Yes. I do try to cut this short by 2 hours, and we're already kind of getting over that.
Yes.
But
sorry.
Rebecca, thank you so much. This was great. I'm so glad that I came back to the. I was on a break for a week because. Yeah. Well, I didn't want to burn myself out. It was more of a precautionary. I wasn't really.
That was smart.
It's funny. I've gotten kind of addicted to it. Those first couple of days, I was like, God, I was like, nah, no, yeah. But I made it. But again, thank you so much for coming on. This was great.
I loved it. You said words that literally, you were sitting there talking about Blake and poetry and music and classical literature. And I don't get that a lot of the time right now.
If you want to, I like to do this before the end. If you want to share your social media or websites, whatever you got, feel free. Shill.
First of all, I want to say thank you so much, Britton. You've been an absolutely fantastic host. Loved hearing what you had to say. I love your style. I think you're going to go long because you have a unique style and it's all yours. And I'm just thrilled to death that you let me be on your show. Thank you so much. And you'll find me at flow.page/RHSnow. That's my link tree. It has all of my stuff on it. Flow.page/RHSnow. It's all one word. Or you can go to watcherthedam.com to see all of our books, including our Prometheus Award nominations. And our newest one, which is Trail of Travail, which has already been published. It's the first book of the second series, Watcher the Damned, Wanderer. If you haven't read the other series, I encourage you to go back and read books 1 through 6. That's Watcher the Damned, Watcher. The beginning, it's origin story, and then it moves into the action part of it with books 4, 5, and 6. And you can pick them up almost anywhere. It will get you started, but I would love for you to read the whole series if you like it, because I have a story to tell, and I've devoted my life to doing that. I hope that you'll join me on that wonderful journey, and maybe we'll learn something along the way.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on and giving so much of your time. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I certainly enjoyed talking with you, so I'm looking forward to putting this out when that'll happen. So hope you guys enjoyed this. Until next time, goodbye, everyone.
Bye.